It's been decades since the last manned moon landing, Apollo 17, which happened in December 1972. Isn't it time we thought about going back to our dusty satellite, and maybe even staying there? NASA has made a promise on this subject. They're preparing to send astronauts on the moon again, perhaps by 2025. This will all happen through a program called Artemis. It's also going to include the first woman ever to experience the lunar surface. Now you might ask, why haven't we done this already? One former NASA administrator said something interesting on the subject. It's not because of scientific or technological issues. Problem was that the potential projects took too long and were just too costly. You see, space travel, especially when it involves humans, isn't easy on the pockets. It's true that, in recent years, NASA had budgets of billions of dollars. Sure sounds like enough money, right? Well, not when you check out their to-do list. That's because they have to consider everything. From telescopes and giant rocket projects to missions also targeting the Sun, Jupiter, Mars, and beyond. When you look at it this way, NASA needs to be very good at budgeting to achieve all those goals. It's not just because of finances, though. The moon itself is quite problematic. It poses real dangers that cannot be taken lightly. For starters, its surface is filled with craters and boulders that aren't easy to land on. Then, there is the moon dust, or regolith, if you'd like to call it by its scientific name. It was created over many years by meteorite impacts. It's extremely harsh and sticks to everything. It can potentially damage spacesuits, vehicles, and systems quite quickly. Also, dealing with the lunar habitat isn't a walk in the park either. The moon has no protective atmosphere. What this means is that for 14 days at a time, the lunar surface is faced with harsh rays from the sun. That period is followed by another 2 weeks of total darkness. All these changes create extreme temperatures, which us humans are not really accustomed to. There are solutions, don't worry. NASA is working on dust and sun-resistant spacesuits and vehicles. They're even developing a system that might supply electricity during those lunar nights. What's even more interesting about this system is it could come in handy on Mars too, once we get there. NASA also needs to draw in really smart people for its projects. Think about it. The average age of the people working for the mission control for Apollo 13 was just 26 years old. And these people had already been part of numerous missions by that time, which means they'd had considerable experience from a very young age. But here's where other individuals can help too. In recent years, it wasn't just NASA who's been working tirelessly to revolutionize space travel. There are many successful people out there with enough resources to join in on these efforts. Some are developing new types of rockets that can land on the moon too. In total, NASA landed 12 people on our satellite. It's definitely one of the most awesome moments in its history, if not the best. And those astronauts did amazing things up there. They brought back rocks, took snapshots, did science experiments, and even left flags behind. These were all important moments of the Apollo missions. But they weren't meant to create a safe place for humans on the moon. Scientists have had this idea of a lunar space station for a long time now. It's only logical. After all, it's just a 3-day trip from Earth. It means we can, technically, afford to make little mistakes here and there, without messing up the whole project. Plus, we'd learn so much before venturing even further into space. A moon base could provide fuel for deep space missions. We could also build telescopes up there and launch them way easier in space. It could also help us in another important project. Figure out how to make Mars habitable too. Not to mention, a lunar space station would help us learn more about the moon's origin. Who knows, it could even bring in some money because of all that fun, exciting lunar tourism. Either way, the Apollo moon program took a lot of work. For starters, let's look at the sheer number of people involved. Around 400,000, from every corner of the states. Not everything was picture perfect, tough. There were two main unfortunate events. Firstly, a fire mishap at the launch pad of Apollo 1. Secondly, an oxygen tank decided to throw a tantrum on Apollo 13, causing severe issues mid-mission. An important part of the project was Saturn V. It is to this day the most powerful rocket flown successfully, being 36 stories high. Still finding it hard to picture? This rocket stood twice as tall as Niagara Falls. Thanks to Saturn V, NASA successfully completed 13 missions. This included chauffeuring 24 astronauts towards the moon, with half of them even having a little walk on its surface. The existing rockets and space shuttles can't go beyond low Earth orbit. In simpler terms, they can't reach the moon with all the gadgets astronauts need to thrive. Current space vehicles are just not capable of carrying that load, at least not since the Apollo missions happened. Regardless, we did make a lot of progress on Earth and are ready to send astronauts to our satellite pretty soon. Here's where the Artemis project comes in. It's a program overseen by NASA. And to make sure it all goes well, NASA previously launched Orion, a spacecraft with no crew on board to orbit the moon and return to Earth. Think of it as an automated test drive. Before we actually send people out there again, we need to make sure all the devices work properly. One day, Orion will be the vehicle that will take astronauts to the moon again. It features a launch abort system to keep astronauts safe in case something bad happens during launch. It also has a service module, which is the powerhouse that fuels and propels Orion and keeps astronauts alive with water, oxygen, power, and temperature control. All these future projects make one wonder, what will life on the moon be like anyway? We can only use our imagination for now. Some say we'll be living in homes straight out of a fairy tale, something like a cozy hobbit hole. Living underground on the moon might be a must. That's due to the scorching temperatures and the lack of oxygen. If you add meteorite threats and the non-stop radiation, it's no wonder we can't just walk on its surface. What about transportation? Big and small companies alike are trying to create the ideal moon ride. If current estimations are current, one type of moon taxi will take off as soon as 2024. Unlike our current rockets, these space taxis won't have to deal with the harsh conditions of re-entering Earth's atmosphere. It will be easier for them to make multiple round trips. To support our lunar living, we'll need to have a special area for space taxis to safely take off and land. Think of it as a landing pad on a firm, flat stretch of moon surface, protected by walls to shield against moon dust. Moving around on the moon's surface will be made easier too. The next generation vehicles we're talking about will have their own controlled environment, which means you won't need a spacesuit while inside. Should feel like stepping out of your space ride for a bit. Then of course, you'll need to put on your spacesuit. All right. So we've got our homes and our rides sorted. But what about fuel? That's where the moon throws us a lifeline. The moon's lighter gravity means we don't need as much power to escape its pull. Plus, the moon has ice, and that's super handy. We might be able to convert this ice into rocket fuel. We'll need dedicated space gadgets to help gather this ice. One such tool is called Trident. It's like a drill, perfect for digging into the icy moon surface. Additional robotic helpers would then turn this ice into fuel and deliver it to a space gas station. If this works, rockets on their way to Mars could stop by for a quick fuel top-up before continuing their journey.
Under your feet, the moon is pulsing. You feel danger with every pore of your body. The lifeless satellite, or so you thought, stay still for a second before knocking you down to the ground with a powerful tremor. Is it a moonquake? For years, scientists believed the moon was completely inactive, but the newest evidence seems to suggest that this idea is totally wrong. Researchers from the University of Maryland have recently discovered 266 mysterious ridges on the far side of the moon. And these ridges likely point to recent geological activity. So, are we really talking moonquakes? Well, kind of. The ridges are located in volcanic regions that formed 3.2 to 3.6 billion years ago, but they appear much younger than expected. Typically found in clusters of 10 to 40, they're often located in areas where the moon's surface is structurally weaker. Now, when astronomers speak about recent, don't take their words literally. They don't mean last year or even decade. Most models scientists created suggested that the moon's geological activity ended 2.5 to 3 billion years ago. But the new information hints at the possibility that these formations have been active within the last billion years. Some of the smaller ridges seem to have formed as recently as 200 million years ago, and that is considered relatively young on the moon's timescale. It means that the moon may still be experiencing geological changes today. These discoveries kinda challenge our understanding of the moon's history and evolution. But how did scientists come to these conclusions anyway? Researchers from the University of Maryland and the Smithsonian Institution used crater counting to estimate the age of lunar ridges. It works like this. Surfaces with fewer craters are younger, and the more craters some region has, the older it is. Plus, the analysis showed that some ridges cut through already existing craters, meaning they likely formed around 160 million years ago. In geological terms, this is very recent, suggesting that these ridge-forming processes may still be happening. Another cool thing is that the ridges on both the near and far sides of the moon are similar, which means they may have formed through the same geological processes, having been shaped by the same forces. These forces might include the moon's gradual shrinking, thermal contraction, and shifts in its orbit. We'll talk about it a bit later. Another argument supporting the idea of a still active moon is decades-old data from the Apollo missions. They had already detected shallow moonquakes with the Apollo Lunar Seismic Experiment, recording 28 quakes ranging from magnitude 1.5 to 5. Researchers believe that these ridges may be linked to similar seismic activity. Now, about that bizarre shrinking of our natural satellite. Scientists believe the moon formed about 4.5 billion years ago when a Mars-sized object collided with early Earth. This catastrophic impact likely sent bunches of superheated material into space. Eventually, they came together and formed the moon. In its early years, the moon was just a molten world, shaking from intense volcanic and seismic activity. So, the moon used to be a molten mess floating through space. But when did it actually solidify? Scientists have finally figured it out, 4.43 billion years ago. This was a huge turning point, not just for the moon, but for Earth too. After all, the giant impact that formed the moon might have also been the final blow that made Earth stable enough to support life. In any case, billions of years passed. The moon gradually cooled and contracted. And now look at this modern-day rocky sphere illuminating our nights. But the moon isn't completely rigid yet. It still keeps cooling. And this slow cooling of its core might be one possible reason for the moon's continued activity. As it cools, the moon's interior contracts, which leads to cracks and shifts in the crust. One of the clearest signs of this contraction is found in the lunar maria. See these large, dark patches on the moon? Those are called maria, areas formed when lava filled ancient asteroid impact craters and then solidified. Then, over time, the cooling and contracting crust created these wrinkle ridges. Another factor of the ongoing geological activity could be the moon's gravitational interactions with Earth. Such non-stop powerful interactions likely create surface stress and trigger tectonic movements. It's all good and exciting, but can this activity on the moon actually affect humans? In a sense, it can. The moon has long been seen as a stable place for future bases and resource extraction. But the discovery of this ongoing geological activity is pretty worrying. If the surface is still shifting, future settlements, infrastructure, and mining operations could face serious risks. That's why, at the moment, we need seismometers and ground-penetrating radars to better understand these movements. It will allow us to assess potential dangers before any long-term missions begin. By the way, there's another potential problem future lunar missions might have to deal with, and it's moon dust, aka regolith. Apollo astronauts quickly learned that this jagged, sticky dust gets everywhere and can damage suits, equipment, and even health. A new study from Texas A&M engineers found another problem. When rockets land or take off, they kick up regolith, which can become a collision hazard, especially with many spacecraft bringing crews and cargo to the moon. Lunar regolith comes in all sizes, from tiny dust particles to large rocks. The main ingredient in moon dust is fine silicate materials, about 70 microns in size, like a human hair. They formed over billions of years as meteors and asteroids smashed into the moon's surface, grinding much of it into powder. Unlike Earth, the moon has almost no atmosphere. It's incredibly thin, so there's no wind or water to smooth out the dust. On top of that, constant exposure to solar wind has given the regolith an electrostatic charge, making it stick to anything it touches. Apollo astronauts quickly found this out the hard way. Moon dust clung to their suits, got trapped inside their landers, and stuck to everything. Worse, it became a health hazard, causing eye irritation and breathing problems inside their spacecraft. But at the moment, it seems like a problem for future us. A much more important issue is finding water to support future missions, and China is going to deal with it. It's getting ready for a big mission to look for hidden ice on the moon. As part of the Chang'e 7 mission in 2026, a flying robot will explore deep craters at the moon's south pole, where ice might be trapped. If they manage to confirm it, this could be a game changer for future lunar missions. Astronauts will have a water source and even fuel for space travel. The mission is a key step in China's plan to land astronauts on the moon within 5 years. While signs of water have been found before, like in soil samples from Chang'e 5's probe and observations by NASA and Indian spacecraft, scientists believe that deep ice deposits are the real key to supporting future missions. The south pole of the moon has some incredibly deep craters, and experts think ice could be hiding inside them. The flying robot will try to explore one or more of these craters after landing. If it does find the ice, it could make long-term moon missions much cheaper and more practical, helping astronauts live and work on the moon. Some scientists also think that this discovery could offer us some clues about extraterrestrial life. In any case, whether we find water on the moon and learn to deal with that pesky dust or not, the recent discovery of those young lunar ridges is a game changer. If the moon is still geologically active, it means we don't know as much about our closest neighbor as we thought. What else could the moon be hiding? Are we really prepared for the idea that this lifeless satellite might actually be more dynamic than we imagined? Future missions, which might not be as safe as we once believed, will probably show.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Is one of the most famous quotes of all time. But was it really what Neil Armstrong uttered on July 20th, 1969, as he set foot on the moon for the first time in human history? It looks like it both is and is not. Thousands of people back on Earth who were following the historical event heard the phrase without one small detail, the indefinite article, a.
It's one small step for man, stands for man.
There's no such thing as small details when it comes to grammar, and the absence of a slightly changed the meaning of the whole sentence, since man and mankind became synonyms in that case. It basically meant, that's one small step for mankind, one giant leap for mankind. Neil Armstrong himself told the press after the Apollo 11 mission that there definitely was an A there, but people just didn't hear it. 30 years later, at the event's anniversary, Armstrong couldn't hear the article while listening to the recording of that famous transmission.
That's one small step for man.
He explained that he wasn't the most articulate person, and he left a lot of syllables out. So it could have been a suppressed sound, and the voice mic simply failed to pick it up. But he insisted that A had been intended, as without it, the statement wouldn't have made sense. In 2006, a computer programmer backed up Armstrong's words with some digital magic.
That's one small step for man.
He ran the audio through some software that singles out nerve impulses and saw it in the graphic form of sound waves. It became obvious that there was a 35 millisecond long bump of sound between 4 and man. It was too brief for other humans to hear, but Neil clearly did leave room for an A. Several years later, Ohio State University studied the speaking patterns of Central Ohioans, like the first man on the moon, and noticed that they often leave out words like for and a. In a BBC documentary, Armstrong's younger brother Dean mentioned that he had seen the quote written on a piece of paper months before the mission. Whether it really happened or not remains a mystery because he had never mentioned it before the documentary. Like with many famous quotes, people tried to find some symbolism behind Armstrong's words. One of his biographers suggested that the quote was inspired by the astronaut's love for J.R.R. Tolkien's books. There was a similar line in The Hobbit. Not a great leap for a man, but a leap in the dark. He found that connection because Armstrong had a Tolkien-themed email address in the 90s, and after retiring from NASA, moved with his family to a farm dubbed Rivendell. It was also the name of a valley and the home of Elrond, the half-human, half-elf from Lord of the Rings. Armstrong himself denied that connection since he hadn't read any of Tolkien's books before going on the Apollo 11 mission to the moon. Others believe the quote was based on the NASA memo. Going to the moon was no walk in the park, so it was important that the first person there pronounces some iconic words about it being a historic step forward for all mankind. Again, the astronaut denied having any memo. He later shared that it had just been the most logical and right thing to say. Armstrong literally had to go a long way to make that legendary step. He took his first airplane ride at the age of 6 in a Ford tri-motor plane with his father, and that's when he fell in love with aviation. He was an active Boy Scout and earned the highest possible rank, Eagle Scout. On his 16th birthday, he became a licensed student pilot before he got his driver's license. He then went on to study aeronautical engineering. His program involved 2 years of university studies at Purdue University, then leave for 2 years of flight training and 1 year of aviator service before returning to finish his final 2 years. While at Purdue, Armstrong joined a fraternity and wrote and directed a musical for the school varsity varieties. He was investing so much effort in his version of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs that he got a C that term in psychology for engineers, a C in aircraft vibrations, and a D in electrical engineering. During his aviator service, Armstrong had to eject from the plane over the water. The winds were taking his parachute back to land. When he thought that was it, his friend from flight school in a service vehicle picked him up and saved his life. Armstrong came back to Purdue, completed his degree, got married for the first time, and became a civilian research pilot right after. The couple moved to California, and whenever he flew over their house, Neil would tip the wings for his wife and son on the ground to see it was him. He had over 1,100 flight hours testing various supersonic planes and the X-15 rocket plane. He wasn't able to apply when the U.S. Air Force was recruiting for the first Man in Space Soonest program in 1958 because they didn't accept civilian test pilots. In April 1962, NASA accepted applicants again for Project Gemini, and this time he was eligible. Neil handed in his application past the deadline, so it was only thanks to a flight simulator who had known him and slipped the application in the pile that he got into the space program. Back then, he wasn't considered NASA's #1 pilot and flew as a backup crew. In 1966, Armstrong became the first American civilian in space, and together with David Scott, pulled off the first manual space docking maneuver. And that's where things have gone wrong. After docking, a rocket thruster had a meltdown and the spacecraft started spinning uncontrollably. They had to separate from the Agena. Armstrong took back control of the Gemini spacecraft and they managed to perform an epic emergency splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Then, it was time to choose who was going to become the first human on the moon. It had to be a civilian, and the decision-makers at NASA chose Armstrong for that honor. Some people believed it was because he had a likable personality, quiet confidence, and was working hard on the way to the stars, literally. To prepare the astronauts for landing the lunar module and the reduced gravity they'd experience, NASA ordered practice vehicles to be built. In early May 1968, at just 98 feet above the ground, Armstrong's vehicle started rolling without control. He had to act quickly and eject to save himself. Later analysis proved that if he had done it just half a second later, that would have been his final moments. On July 16, 1969, Armstrong, along with other members of the mission, took off for the moon. NASA built the Saturn V, the most powerful rocket that had ever flown successfully, to take them there. It was as tall as a 36-story building. 4 days later, they reached their goal. After spending 21 hours and 36 minutes there, leaving their footprints which are still visible on the moon's surface, collecting surface samples, taking photos, and testing scientific instruments, and headed back to Earth. Armstrong didn't enjoy public attention that much, so he decided to take up a teaching career. He became famous worldwide, but he still had to work hard to defend his master's thesis at the University of Southern California. He then retired from NASA and moved back to Ohio with his family, where he would teach for the following 8 years. He didn't cut the connections with NASA altogether and worked with them on several commissions, helping the investigations into both the Apollo 13 malfunction and the tragic Challenger space shuttle incident. In 1985, Armstrong journeyed to the North Pole with a group of fellow explorers. It made perfect sense that he wanted to see it not only from space, but from the ground level. For his giant leap for mankind, Armstrong was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the Congressional Space Medal of Honor, and the Congressional Gold Medal.
Okay, I officially give up on the hope that the moon is made of cheese after all. Wow, not even Gouda. The shiny lunar ball, or a curved banana, or half of a coin, depending on what phase it's in, has different layers inside, just like Earth. One of these layers is called the inner core. About 20 years ago, scientists were observing how the moon rotates. Using that data, they concluded that it had a fluid outer core. But the inner core was hard to study, so they didn't know if it was solid like a rock or molten like a hot liquid. But things are clearer now. Astronomers have collected data from different missions, including the Apollo missions, where astronauts went to the moon and gathered information themselves. Plus, they've used a special technique called seismic data. This method is all about studying how sound waves move through things. Take earthquakes on our planet as an example. When an earthquake happens, it creates waves that travel through the ground. Scientists can detect and analyze these waves to learn more about Earth's interior. The same idea can apply to other objects in our solar system, or planets, or, in this case, the Moon. When quakes or moonquakes happen, they generate sound waves, and by carefully listening to and studying these waves, scientists can create a detailed map of what's inside the object. They can figure out things like different layers, what they're made of, and how they're arranged. To check the Moon's deep interior, scientists also use something called laser ranging. This method measures the distance between the surface of the Earth and the Moon very precisely. And ta-da! Our natural satellite's inner core is a dense, solid ball made of iron, just like Earth's. It's about 310 miles wide, which is nearly 15% the size of the entire Moon. Researchers also have stumbled upon evidence that supports the theory that the layer between the Moon's surface and its core, called the mantle, has been moving around as the Moon evolved over time. This movement is something we call lunar mantle overturn, and it could explain why we find elements rich in iron on the lunar surface. Mantle material ends up being carried upward, and the volcanic rock remains in the Moon's crust. Some of the materials in this rock were too dense, like me, so they just sank back through the lighter crust material all the way to the core mantle boundary. It's like a cycle where the Moon's mantle material goes up during volcanic activity, carries iron-rich elements to the surface, and then sinks back down. There's another mystery scientists have been trying to solve: what caused the Moon's magnetic field to weaken and nearly disappear over time? It seems that now that we know about the iron core and the global mantle overturn, we might get some more answers about the Moon's magnetic field. Knowing what the inner core is like can help us better understand the Moon's history as well as the history of our entire solar system. Now, one of the theories that's widely accepted about the origin of the Moon says there was a massive collision between Earth, in its early stages, and another mysterious object in our solar system. It's called the Large Impact Theory, and this collision was so strong it ripped off a big chunk of the primitive molten Earth. I mean, not so big compared to what's left. If you put a US nickel next to a green pea, you get a good idea of how big our planet is compared to the Moon. Now, this chunk was set into orbit around our planet, and this might have happened about 95 million years after our solar system formed. The object that collided with Earth could have been about 10% the mass of our home planet and roughly the size of Mars. Well, it makes sense. Earth and the Moon do have similar compositions after all. Of course, there are other ideas about how the Moon formed. One says that the gravitational force of our planet captured it. This means that the Moon was just an object innocently passing by when suddenly it got attracted and pulled into Earth's orbit. There's even a hypothesis that Earth stole the Moon from Venus. Ooh. In that case, the Moon shouldn't complain. I guess the view is way better here. So yeah, the Moon and Earth are similar when it comes to rocks and some minerals. But the Moon doesn't have the same atmosphere as our planet. Its atmosphere is thin and consists of some weird gases that include potassium and sodium, which is not something you can find in the atmosphere of Mars, Venus, or Earth. And the rocks on the Moon don't contain water. But that doesn't mean there's no water at all up there. A long time ago, in the 17th century, astronomers saw large dark spots on the Moon's surface. One of these astronomers thought these spots looked like oceans, and he called them maria, which means seas in Latin. Other astronomers also made maps of the Moon, and they used the term maria to describe these dark spots. For example, Mare Tranquillitatis translates to Sea of Tranquility, where Apollo 11 made its touchdown. But it seems those dark spots are not actually oceans. They are plains made of hardened lava that erupted long ago. These volcanic eruptions left behind smooth flat areas called basalt plains. In the late 1800s, one sky watcher studied the Moon and found it didn't have an atmosphere. Without an atmosphere, there are no clouds and no air to keep water from evaporating. So scientists thought that any water on the Moon would just disappear right away. They believed the Moon was totally dry. But then, in 1961, one physicist had a different idea. He pointed out there could be water on the Moon in special areas called permanently shadowed regions. These are spots on the Moon where the sun doesn't shine, so they stay dark all the time. Water ice could exist in these dark areas because they're extremely cold and the ice wouldn't evaporate. But when astronauts from the Apollo missions went to the Moon, they brought back soil samples, and scientists found no signs of water in them. So everyone went back to thinking that the Moon was completely dry. In the 90s, NASA focused on these shadowed craters and found high concentrations of hydrogen, which meant there could be ice at the Moon's poles. They still weren't certain, so they kept digging and, after a while, found hydrogen trapped inside tiny beads of volcanic glass. Since there are no active volcanoes on the Moon today, which means water probably was present on the Moon when these volcanoes erupted long ago. Plus, there could be way more water back in the early days of our Moon. In 2020, NASA's SOFIA mission showed us what we'd been looking for a really long time. There is water on the Moon after all. It turns out the water is hidden within the grains of lunar dust or sticking to the surface in the sunlit areas of the Moon. So there are no oceans like we have on Earth, but at least there's something. The question remains, how did water even get there? It seems the Moon had a chaotic history back at the time when it was forming, as probably most of the planets and moons in our solar system. So there is some evidence that water came there from comets hitting its surface back in the old days, or maybe even keeps on coming from those that are slamming into the Moon right now. We're talking about a chaotic situation where icy micrometeorites collide with the Moon's surface, and dust then makes an even bigger mess when interacting with the solar wind. But we're waiting to find out more about this. Because, as we all know, when you mention water, you also inevitably talk about life. That's why we want to know more, for instance, about all that ice hidden in polar craters on the Moon. Maybe it can teach us more about how life developed on Earth. Maybe comets brought all the necessary elements here. Then, what if there are some of those elements stuck in the ice on the Moon, too? There's something happening inside the Moon, something that nobody expected. Not a dramatic shift you'd see on the outside, but deep down, where things seem frozen in time, scientists have uncovered a hidden layer of what you could only call moon goo. Remember those school lessons about the crust, mantle, and core? Much like the Earth, the Moon is made up of layers, a crust, mantle, and core. However, the Moon's core is much smaller compared to ours. Earth's core is huge. It makes up about a third of our entire planet's mass. The Moon's core makes up only about 1 to 2% of its mass, and its diameter is about 1/5 the diameter of the Moon itself. It's surrounded by a hard, rocky mantle. But it turns out that between these two layers, that mysterious goo layer, and it's way more important than you might think. The layer is soft and partially molten, ebbing and flowing like the tides in our oceans. It rises and falls, stretching and shifting as if it were alive. Its movement isn't chaotic, but subtle and regular. We always knew that the Moon influences our seas and oceans, causing tides with its gravity. But it turns out that we influence it back. The goo ocean reacts to the gravitational dance between Earth and the Sun. Also, the molten layer could be made of ilmenite, a very intriguing material. Ilmenite is rich in titanium, a strong and lightweight metal that we really love over here on Earth. Titanium is used in everything from airplane parts and spacecraft to medical devices, even in everyday items like bikes and laptops, all because it's incredibly strong and very resistant to corrosion and heat. So, if the Moon might have a molten layer rich in ilmenite, that would be awesome. Astronomers are already planning for lunar bases, and if we had a material to build structures, spacecraft, or even tools for astronauts right there, that would be a game changer. Otherwise, we'd need to transport materials from Earth, which is extremely costly. This is our first tangible sign that the Moon is not just a cold, boring rock. Instead, it's dynamic, living, and breathing, with moving forces beneath the surface. NASA used new special tools to discover this: the Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. These are both space missions designed to study the Moon, But they don't just look at the surface like a telescope. Instead, they help measure things we can't see with our eyes, like the moon's gravity and how it changes over time. Grail sent 2 small spacecraft around the moon named Ebb and Flow. Clever. The idea was for these spacecraft to fly close to each other and measure tiny differences in the moon's gravity as they go. It's like they were feeling the moon's invisible pull in different places. If the moon's gravity was stronger in one spot, the spacecraft moved closer together, and if it was weaker, they moved farther apart. This helps scientists understand what's going on inside the moon, even if they can't actually go there. And the spacecraft intentionally crashed into the moon in December 2012 to end the mission. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is a bit different. It takes super detailed pictures of the moon and collects other important information about its surface. By combining the information from both Grail and LRO, we were able to find this goo layer. But this discovery actually challenges everything we thought we knew about lunar geology. How did this molten layer get there? How long has it existed? And perhaps more fascinating, how it stayed warm for millions of years? That's some million-dollar questions. The moon's core generates heat just like ours. But it's not as easy as saying, oh, the core's heat probably keeps it warm and molten. Well, first, the moon's core is much smaller and less active than Earth's, meaning it produces significantly less heat. Plus, the moon is much cooler than Earth in general. With temperature dropping to minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, how could this inner layer still stay in this flowing state? That's still a mystery. In any case, this goo could actually explain a lot of stuff about the moon. For example, astronomers were exploring moonquakes and how they happen. Now they think that it might be this semi-molten layer shifting and moving beneath the surface. Now, beyond the moon itself, it also tells us more about other celestial bodies. If the moon, something we considered basically a huge static rock, has such a dramatic life, what about other planets, moons, or asteroids? Could they also hide similar hidden movements beneath their surfaces? We can even understand our own planet better, learn more about how tides and similar stuff works. There are so many great discoveries we've been making on the moon. Recently, we found some awesome stuff beneath the surface, massive caves hidden for millions of years. For over 50 years, scientists have suspected that the moon's surface is full of underground tunnels and caves. These are known as lava tubes because they were formed by lava. Duh! Millions of years ago, the moon was pretty unstable. It underwent some volcanic activity, causing eruptions. When a volcano erupts, lava can flow across the surface. As the outer layer of the lava cools and hardens, it forms a solid roof of dark material. It's actually what these famous dark spots on the moon are. These are dark, hardened remains of ancient lava. But the hot, molten lava continues to flow through the center. Once the eruption ends and the lava drains away, what's left behind is an empty hollow tunnel, hence a lava tube. On Earth, we have lava tubes in places like Hawaii or Iceland, where volcanic activity has created similar underground tunnels. The same thing happened on the moon billions of years ago, although they're much crazier compared to ours. In fact, lunar lava tubes are now thought to be some of the largest and longest in the entire solar system. One such cave was discovered beneath the famous Mare Tranquillitatis, the place where Apollo 11 first landed, and it's at least 340 feet deep. Now, all these lava systems have remained hidden just beneath the surface, untouched for millions of years. Only now, they finally managed to prove their existence. Scientists from the University of Trento in Italy found them using special radar technology and advanced computer methods. These techniques let you see underground by sending radar waves. The waves bounce back and give clues about what's hidden underneath. By analyzing the way these waves reflected back, the researchers could detect the shape and size of the hidden caves. Now, the best thing about this discovery is that we could build all our bases there. These caves protect from radiation, harsh winds, and meteoroids. NASA even found evidence that some of these caves stay at a steady 63 degrees Fahrenheit. That's some crazy coziness for the moon. And on top of that, there could even be some water there. So humans could take shelter inside these natural tunnels and build entire colonies on the moon. And I know what you're thinking. could unexpected lunar monsters hide deep in those caves? Well, sure. There's a huge potential for exploring these caves and finding some awesome stuff. But even if we manage to find a miracle, like small life or microbial organisms, there's a 99% chance that there won't be actual animals or monsters. It would just be impossible for them to develop in such conditions. But it would make a great horror movie. Researchers want to send robots or drones to explore the tunnels first, and then see if they're safe enough for humans. And it's not just the US getting in on the action. China is also investigating the possibility of using these moon caves as a future base, showing that the race to explore and settle the moon is heating up.
What if we built a huge tower on the moon? A tower that could provide future missions with light, power, and guidance technologies that could help astronauts explore our natural satellite. It's not something from a sci-fi book. It's a novel idea from Honeybee Robotics, one of the brightest space technology companies. The lunar utility navigation with advanced remote sensing and autonomous beaming for energy redistribution, or simply Lunar Saber, is a 328 tall pole. It's capable of holding 1 ton of equipment on top of it. But how could we build such a giant construction? No rocket would be able to hold and land such a giant pole on the moon. And building such a tower on the lunar surface without already existing infrastructure would be next to impossible. So, Honeybee might use the deployable interlocking actuated bands for linear operations Diablo system. It uses a rolled piece of metal and bends it into a deployable cylindrical structure that can support really heavy payloads. It would be easier to build it on the moon because gravity there is only 16% of that on Earth. The structure could serve as the base for Lunar Saber. Power is crucial on the moon, so putting solar panels along the sides of the pole would be super useful. The company is now discussing 2 types of solar panels. The first one is like a yo-yo extended from the top payload holder of the tower. It would envelop the metallic structure and allow access to the sun at all angles. The second option might involve the top part of the tower. It could deploy its booms to hold traditional solar panels and then track the sun. Power supply wouldn't be the only Lunar Saber's task. It would also be able to beam power to other devices, track other devices, and provide communication, light, and energy. Let's talk about these functions in more detail. If one mast of the pole was bathing in sunlight while another was lingering in shadow, the one with excess power would be able to beam power to the one lacking it. Plus, similar power beaming could happen between Lunar Saber and rovers and astronauts in spacesuits. To beam all that power effectively, though, the tower would need to know the precise location of those objects. That's where the second technology would come in. Lunar Saber could use a set of sensors to find and track other objects. Basically, anything in a direct line of sight could be tracked and powered by the tower itself. Lunar Saber could also act as a lunar cell phone tower. It would allow wireless communication in its network. And finally, it would be super helpful for astronauts to actually see where they would be going. Rovers wouldn't need to wait out the 2-week lunar darkness. Floodlights at the top of the tower could provide enough visible light for astronauts and rovers, which would allow them to effectively perform their activities at all times. But guess what? The tower could become even more useful. We could combine several towers in a mesh. It would allow astronauts to communicate more effectively. Plus, power could be beamed even from the other side of the moon. It would enable 2 main applications that have been a thorn in lunar exploration's side so far: constant communication with Earth and constant supply of solar power. The thing is, explorations on the other side of the moon are quite tricky, which limits the area of scientific research to the side directly facing Earth. But a strategically placed mesh of Lunar Sabers could allow communication back to Earth, and we would be able to explore the dark side of the moon. Since at least half of our natural satellite is always lit up, if we placed Lunar Sabers correctly around the surface of the moon, there would always be at least one bathing in sunlight. That one sunlit tower would then wirelessly transmit power to others in its line of sight. This process would keep going until power was beamed to the main astronaut's base, supplying them with power even in the cold lunar darkness. Unfortunately, at the moment, such technologies look unrealistic. we're not close to having wireless energy transmission over long distances. Even on Earth, we still need to use batteries and wires. It might be easier to launch many satellites into orbit around the moon than to create a network of giant communication towers.
In 2025, humans will have a unique opportunity: travel to the moon. So far, only 12 people have walked on Earth's natural satellite, but a private company is offering tourists a chance to change that. If you are hog stinky rich, you can pay $750 million to spend several days exploring the moon and watching Earth from a distance. You can even join unique scientific experiments. Now, humans also want to build their forever homes on the moon. In fact, NASA believes that North Americans may have their own share of the moon by 2040. And you don't even need to be an astronaut to buy a plot of land on the moon. Of course, billionaires are already making plans. Their first idea is to exploit natural resources. The moon is packed with stuff that is rare here on Earth, like helium-3 and many rare Earth minerals, or more precisely, rare moon minerals. But I digress. Hey, if you can get your hands on some of it, you may get even richer. First, helium-3. It's great for clean nuclear energy, but it's super rare on Earth because it escapes into space. The moon, though, has tons of it, enough to power Earth for 1,000 years. Rare earth minerals are not actually rare on Earth, but they're hard to mine because they react with oxygen. On the moon, hey, there's no oxygen, so we could easily get loads of these materials to make better tech, like electronics and batteries. Scientists aren't thrilled about this. For the first time, they have a chance to explore 4.5 billion years of space history. Because the moon's soil has stayed the same for billions of years. Studying its rocks could reveal lots of secrets about the universe's origins. But if billionaires mine the moon and destroy these rocks, all that knowledge could be lost forever. Another problem with exploring the moon is the size of it. The moon is big, but the best spots, the ones with water and sunlight, are limited. Most of the lunar surface is dangerous because of earthquakes or moonquakes, radiation, and meteorites. That means tourists, scientists, and mining companies would be elbowing each other in 3 small regions. The first region is called the Peaks of Eternal Light because there's always sunlight over there, making it a great energy source for telescopes or human colonies. The second spot is the far side of the moon. Here, radio signals from Earth are not so strong. It's not just peaceful and quiet there. It's also a great place to set up a telescope and study the universe. The third place is called the Pits of Eternal Darkness. It's where all the trolls on social media go on vacation. Nah, it's really because no sunlight reaches that area. This place is even better for scientists because they can use special astronomy tools to study the most distant parts of the universe. This is also where you can find about 1 billion tons of water. If scientists could visit the moon and study it, they would make amazing discoveries. But today, there are no international laws protecting space. No country can own the moon, but this can't stop a private mining company from calling dibs on a particularly good spot. In the past, a bunch of nations signed the Outer Space Treaty, and they agreed that space exploration was supposed to benefit all humankind. But exploring it is not cheap in the first place. Taking a single gallon of water from the moon to the Earth is extraordinarily expensive, and I bet not everyone can afford that. Human activity on the moon is also extremely dangerous because it might change its atmosphere. Now, to understand it better, let's look at the surface of the moon. This floating rock has many craters that have been forming for billions of years. When a meteorite crashes into the moon, fine dust called regolith, with particles so tiny they can cut like glass, rises into the air. This process once created the atmosphere of the moon, and this atmosphere is quite different from the atmosphere of Earth. A big rocket landing on the moon can launch this fine dust into the lunar sky, and the difference here is that the space objects crashing into the lunar surface are actually gentler. A rocket landing is so intense it can increase the number of atoms in the sky 100,000 times. If the number of atoms in the atmosphere grows, the air turns into a dusty plasma. This means that you'll be breathing in air as toxic as the one that poisoned miners in the olden days. Such an atmosphere could end space tourism too, because it makes electronics malfunction and machinery shut down. Well, truth be told, our own presence on the moon is already dangerous. When scientists discovered water on the surface of the moon, they were super excited to study it. This was their chance to understand where this water came from, and even figure out how water appeared on Earth. But when our spacecraft land on the moon, outgassing occurs. This means that the water on the surface evaporates. This evaporated water can contaminate the water on the moon, ruining all scientific data. Because when astronauts take a sample of the lunar water to study it, they will get the water from Earth they have brought along. Bummer, really. And it's not just the water we contaminate, it's everything. A spaceship can carry any living thing from Earth to the moon. It can also bring extraterrestrial life forms back to Earth. This type of contamination is extremely dangerous because it can put human lives at risk. Something similar happened when Europeans were exploring unfamiliar lands they came upon in the Americas. They accidentally introduced new microbes to the natives they met. And since the immune systems of the native population were not used to those new bacteria and viruses, they got sick and worse. At the same time, Europeans also became ill with diseases their bodies didn't know about yet. And even though moon tourism is not happening yet, humans are already littering the lunar highlands like their own backyard. In 2024, an artist named Jeff Koons sent a sculpture to the moon. The sculpture is a transparent box filled with spheres, and it got to the moon thanks to a ride on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. In each sphere, Koons engraved the name of a human he considered super important to humankind, like Aristotle, David Bowie, and Leonardo da Vinci. Thankfully, you don't have to go all the way to the moon to see this sculpture. You can purchase an NFT of each sphere. Or not. Back in 1971, the crew members of Apollo 15 also left a couple of things on the moon. A figure created by a Belgian artist and a commemorative plaque to honor other astronauts who couldn't be there. And it's not just art that humans dumped on the moon. If you take a walk, you might just stumble upon 413,000 pounds of materials left behind, including a gold olive branch, a falcon feather, a silver astronaut pin, a Bible, some golf balls, a hammer, and even leftover urine collection kits. Most of this stuff was left behind by the astronauts that explored space between the 60s and 70s. So you can find moon rangers, lunar probes, and orbiters that are decades old already. Now, to be fair, bringing back unnecessary equipment costs a ton of money. And back in the 60s, their priority was the safety of the astronauts. The sad truth is that the moon is already turning into an extraterrestrial landfill, and we don't even live there yet. But now we want to settle there, so NASA is trying to get rid of all this trash. The good news? Hey, you can be part of this process. The space agency launched a competition called the Lunar Recycle Challenge, and if you want to join it, you must find ways to reduce the amount of litter produced and recycle it into materials that can be used for space exploration. To win, you need to develop a way to completely recycle the trash that is on the surface of the moon. You will help science and win $3 million. And if you get this sum, well, you might finally afford a ticket into space.
What if our moon was hollow? Would we be able to hide inside in case some terrible catastrophe destroyed our home planet? Well, the supporters of the hollow moon theory believe that it's actually a real option. The hollow moon is a hypothesis claiming that Earth's moon is either completely hollow or has quite a lot of place inside. The thing is, the moon is less dense than Earth, and it seems to support the idea of its hollowness. But according to science, the reason is the fact that Earth's upper mantle and crust are less dense than the heavy iron core of our planet. Then, there's also the claim that the moon rings like a bell. For almost a decade, between 1969 and 1977, seismometers installed on the moon by the Apollo missions kept recording moonquakes. The moon was reported to be ringing like a bell during such quakes, especially shallow ones. On the 20th of November, 1969, Apollo 12 deliberately crashed the ascent stage of its lunar module into the surface of our natural satellite. According to NASA, after that, the ringing continued for almost an hour. This made some people argue that the moon must be hollow like a bell. Later, lunar seismology researched those shallow moonquakes and showed that they acted differently than quakes on our planet, mostly due to differences in type, texture, and density of the lunar and Earth's rock layers. The speed of sound waves in solids is determined by the medium's compressibility and density. No one has ever found any evidence of a large empty space inside the moon. And still, in 1970, Michael Vasson and Alexander Sherbakov suggested a hypothesis that the moon could be a spaceship designed by mysterious extraterrestrial beings. In 1965, writer Isaac Asimov made an observation that added fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories. He marveled at the sheer astronomical accident that the moon fits so snugly over the sun during total eclipses. The sun's greater distance makes up for the incomparably larger size of the star. As a result, it seems to us that the moon and the sun are the same size. The author added that there was no astronomical reason why the sun and the moon should fit so well. So since the 1970s, conspiracy theorists have been quoting Asimov's words about solar eclipses as evidence of the artificial origin of the moon. Mainstream astronomers disagree with such an interpretation, saying that the angular diameters of the moon and the sun don't perfectly match during eclipses. They vary by several percent over time. Many other pieces of evidence confirm that the moon is a solid body that formed after a planetoid crashed into Earth. In the past, scientists thought that the moon appeared after our rapidly spinning planet got rid of a good chunk of its mass. This idea was suggested in 1879 by George Darwin, the son of the very Charles Darwin, the famous biologist. This theory remained popular until the Apollo missions. Then, in 1925, Austrian geologist Otto Ampferer offered another idea, that Earth and the moon could have formed together from a primordial accretion disk, a rotating disk of dense gas and dust surrounding a young, newly formed star, and used to be a double system. The third theory stated that the moon could have once been a planetoid caught by the gravity of our planet. The modern explanation usually involves the giant impact hypothesis. According to it, a Mars-sized space body hit Earth and created a debris ring around our planet. In the end, this ring gathered into a single natural satellite, our moon. But getting back to the hollow moon theory, at the moment, there's no scientific evidence to support this hypothesis. Seismic observations and other data indicate that the moon has a solid interior with several layers, a thin crust, quite extensive mantle, and a dense core. These days, the idea of the hollow moon is considered to be a conspiracy theory.
Aliens have invaded Earth and they are not here for friendly interaction. It all begins with the detection of an extraterrestrial signal by the SETI network. This isn't just random space noise. This is a clear sign of an alien civilization. Once the information reaches world governments, rumors start circulating that aliens are on their way to Earth. The US, Russia, and China are the first to learn of the threat, but all governments try to keep the news secret, knowing that widespread panic could lead to catastrophic consequences. At first, nothing happens. Days turn into weeks, and skeptics begin to mock the very idea of an invasion. News channels call it a hoax, while conspiracy theorists claim it's a government distraction. People continue their daily routines, unaware that something is already approaching at an unimaginable speed. Then, without warning, they arrive. Their ships break through the atmosphere, not in a slow cinematic descent, but in an instantaneous burst of speed, defying human understanding of physics. The first crafts land in major cities across the globe: New York, Moscow, Beijing, London, Tokyo. Within hours, the entire planet is covered in their presence. Authorities still don't know who these beings are or what they want. Are they destructive creatures seeking Earth's resources? Or perhaps they want to expand their empire? Another theory emerges. Maybe these invaders are artificial intelligence created for space exploration, no longer dependent on planet conditions for survival. Attempts to communicate prove futile. Linguists, AI systems, and mathematicians fail to decipher their signals. Then comes the first attack. In one swift moment, a military base in Nevada is wiped off the map, leaving only a perfectly circular crater. The world realizes that this is not a peaceful encounter. The aliens begin their offensive, and it becomes clear that they are not here for diplomacy. Earth, rich in minerals, water, and other valuable resources, is an ideal target. Their technology far surpasses ours. Despite our best efforts to resist, our military stands no chance against their lasers, nanotech, and antimatter bombs. Even the United States, with its trillion-dollar military budget, can't match the alien technology. As they destroy key military bases and power infrastructure, the world is plunged into darkness and chaos. World powers begin to cooperate, but nuclear weapons are considered a last resort, knowing that using them could doom the planet. With cities in ruin and society unraveling, millions of civilians are forced to flee to remote areas, hoping to survive. Meanwhile, scientists scramble to understand alien technology, hoping to find ways to protect Earth or develop vaccines against possible biological threats. The global communication network is broken, and humanity is on the brink of collapse. The aliens continue their systematic destruction of Earth's defenses. Satellites are taken out, cutting off global surveillance. Drones and fighter jets fall from the sky like birds caught in a storm. Entire armies are reduced to ash in seconds. Panic spreads. Governments collapse. The world's leaders either go into hiding or perish in the initial wave of destruction. Civilization, as it was known, is no more. As time passes, the alien technology continues to overpower us. Our military forces are crushed, and our only hope now lies in guerrilla warfare by civilians. The United States, with its high number of privately owned firearms, may have a better chance than other nations, but it's still unlikely that we can withstand the alien onslaught. Small resistance groups form in hidden bunkers, underground tunnels, and abandoned cities. They communicate through salvaged radios, sharing whatever knowledge they have about the invaders. Some manage to take down individual alien soldiers, but their victories are short-lived. The aliens adapt quickly, learning from human tactics, neutralizing any newfound weaknesses. However, there's another possibility. Maybe the aliens aren't here to destroy us. There's a theory that such an advanced civilization might have evolved to be peaceful, having long overcome the destructive tendencies that lead to war. Another theory suggests that aliens might not need Earth's resources, as space is abundant with energy and rare minerals. Alternatively, they might just be studying us, like creatures in a zoo, observing our progress without interference. But reality sets in once more. The aliens proceed to the next stage of their plan, terraforming Earth. This could involve altering the atmosphere by releasing gases like methane or ammonia, slowly making the planet inhospitable for humans. They may also manipulate the oceans, changing their acidity or salinity, which would destroy marine life. To further reshape Earth, the aliens activate dormant volcanoes and trigger earthquakes around the globe, either to alter the planet's environment to their liking or to access resources more easily. As Earth becomes increasingly unstable, the aliens complete their conquest, and humanity's numbers dwindle. Those who remain are used for genetic experiments or research. Our bodies, brains, and memories might be studied, or we could be wiped out altogether in a matter of days. Earth would be left a barren, lifeless rock drifting through space. However, perhaps the aliens aren't as hostile as we think. Maybe they don't want to conquer us, but instead just want to observe us, like we study animals in a zoo. Maybe, over time, they would want to cooperate with humanity and help us grow. Or perhaps, this is just the beginning of a new era for Earth.
Enceladus. Saturn's ocean-covered moon spews water into space non-stop. The liquid leaves the insides of the moon through fractures in its icy crust. In the mid-2000s, the Cassini spacecraft analyzed the composition of these jets and spotted molecules that included ammonia and carbon dioxide. Both compounds are crucial for the existence of life on Earth. But recently, scientists have made another analysis of the Cassini samples. And this study has revealed a great chemical diversity of Enceladus. It makes this small icy moon one of the top candidates for finding life in the solar system. In an attempt to find out the true chemical makeup of the moon, researchers at NASA examined the data collected in 2001 and 2012 again. All this information was gathered by NASA's Cassini-Huygens mission. It flew a spacecraft through the impressive water plumes of Saturn's moon many times. The samples were analyzed by a special instrument identifying compounds by their molecular weight. This instrument is called a mass spectrometer, and Cassini had one on board. The initial analysis showed that the jets contained 5 types of molecules: water, carbon dioxide, ammonia, methane, and molecular hydrogen. But later, experts spotted a few bigger and heavier compounds, including ethane and hydrogen cyanide, as well as traces of methanol. The initial Cassini analysis didn't show these compounds because the equipment on board the spacecraft wasn't capable of identifying them. That's why it came as a surprise that Saturn's small moons could be so chemically active and able to produce heavy molecules. Together with previously found components like water and ammonia, the newly discovered molecules might serve as fuel and building blocks for microbes, which in turn means that they could probably support an independent origin of life. It's one of the reasons why, after the discovery of its oceans, Enceladus has been one of the main targets in the search for extraterrestrial life. The molecules might be mixing together through the hydrothermal activity on the moon's seafloor, creating a habitable environment where life could appear. So far, scientists haven't found any evidence that could indicate that such a process has actually been going on. Plus, no one knows yet how the erupting water makes its way through the icy shell of the moon. Still, the most recent findings might help ongoing and planned missions exploring other ocean worlds similar to Enceladus. One of such worlds is Jupiter's watery moon Europa. This place is likely to have the same properties as Saturn's moon. Hopefully, we'll get the answers to these questions soon, with the help of the European Space Agency's Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer spacecraft. At the moment, it's on its way to the Jupiter system. But then another question might arise. If we found the conditions where life can originate and even thrive, can't this fact already be proof of the existence of extraterrestrial life? Doesn't it mean that life must be abundant in the universe? Then why haven't we come across other species yet? The answers to this paradox vary from optimistic to downright terrifying. It might be because we haven't been looking long enough, or maybe we haven't been emitting enough traceable signatures for other civilizations to find us, or perhaps no species have ever made it to the point where they could come into contact with other civilizations. There's also the frightening dark forest hypothesis. It's a theory claiming that loads of alien civilizations exist throughout the universe, but they are all silent and hostile. They try to maintain their undetectability for fear of getting destroyed by another unfriendly species. So, following this hypothesis, we can presume that any spacefaring civilization must view other intelligent forms of life as an inevitable threat, and the best course of action is to hide its existence altogether. This makes the cosmic electromagnetic spectrum eerily quiet, with no evidence of any intelligent extraterrestrial life. This way, the universe can be compared to a dark forest filled with armed hunters wandering among trees like ghosts.
Marriage is not only about happiness, mutual support, love, and friendship. Marriage is also about trials, crises, and storms. And this Swedish couple survived several storms during their honeymoon. Literally. Not screams, insults, and drama, but real hurricanes, fires, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. This is a really cinematic love story. Newlyweds against nature. Meet Erica and Stefan. They met in Stockholm while working on a joint project, parted, but started chatting with each other on social networks. Their long-distance communication lasted for several years before Stefan decided to ask the woman out on a date. and it's worth paying tribute. It wasn't a typical date in a restaurant or in a park. Stefan suggested that Erica fly with him to go diving in Egypt. They realized that they both loved to travel and finally fell in love with each other. After a fabulous wedding and the birth of a beautiful daughter, the couple decided to go on a 4-month honeymoon. The tour was impressive. From Sweden to Indonesia, then to Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and China. They didn't expect that the trip would turn out to be a real adventure where safety was not guaranteed. At first, they got stuck at Munich airport. All flights were delayed because of a severe thunderstorm. In Bali, Indonesia, they went to a high mountain with their little daughter. A strong wind began to blow at the top. It tore off the roof of the tourist bus where our heroes were sitting. Fortunately, no one was injured, and there were no other problems. But at that moment, it was just a teaser of the coming disasters. The couple arrived in Australia, where a wildfire first started near the city of Perth. Stefan and Erica didn't want to cough up thick smoke, so they quickly left for the city of Cairns. It was during that period when a ferocious cyclone began there. The storm was so strong that the Australian Red Cross Service provided shelter for 2,500 people in the mall. And there, another problem began. Imagine 2,500 people in a big, hot room without electricity while a hurricane is raging around. Oh, and there were only 5 toilets in the entire building. How nervous do you think people were? Eric and Stefan recall that some guys started fighting because of stress. The tension was getting stronger, but fortunately, the mall guards kept the situation under control. Wildfires, hurricanes, it seems that something is missing. Oh yes, what about an earthquake? The couple faced 2 earthquakes during their honeymoon, one of which happened in Japan in 2011. They went through all this together with their little daughter. Just imagine how their daughter was amazed by all these adventures. Such a trip strengthened their marriage. Of course, after natural disasters, any domestic quarrel would seem like a mere trifle. Erica admitted that in crisis situations, Stefan fully justified her trust and behaved as she had hoped. Oh, how sweet. What if we create tours for married couples who are planning to divorce? Survive the storm, fire, earthquake, and flood together, and then think again whether you should leave each other. Imagine that you've gone through several natural disasters in your entire life. Now the question is, are you lucky because you've survived, or are you an unlucky person because you've run into such troubles? It depends on how you feel about it. For example, there's a woman, Dana Weiland, who lives in California. She has survived several disasters throughout her life and continues to smile. And more recently, she's faced another disaster, wildfires in her home state. But let's take it in order. In 2005, Dana Weiland lived in New Orleans, and if anyone doesn't know, that year, Hurricane Katrina destroyed many houses in this and other cities. Dana's house was no exception. According to her, the lower floor of the house was completely flooded with water. Of course, she had to give up everything and evacuate. Dana and her family drove to Texas to a friend's place for about 20 hours. 1 month later, Hurricane Rita arrived there, and Dana and her family evacuated again. It looked as if nature was following her around, but our heroine was not one of the timid ones. Several years later, she faced another disaster, Snowmageddon. This was when a huge amount of wet, cold snow flooded cities and roads. Strong wind, blizzard, and endless snowfall. All traffic stopped. The lights turned off. The streets were empty. Dana sat for 11 days without electricity during this snow apocalypse. And after all these disasters, she got the exact opposite of snow. Wildfires in her hometown of Lake Arrowhead in San Bernardino County. Let's hope that this time, everything will be fine with her again, and she will meet any adversity with a smile on her face. Have you heard that lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place? Can it hit the same person twice? What if it strikes the same guy 7 times in a few hours? This is not a movie plot in a tragicomedy genre. This is the real story of Roy Sullivan, a man who got into the Guinness Book of Records for the number of lightning strikes survived. There are more than 8 million lightning strikes on Earth every day, which is about 100 strikes per second. But even so, the probability of getting struck is extremely low, 1 chance in 10 million. For Roy Sullivan, these chances were too high. For his strange record, people nicknamed him the human lightning rod. For the first time, lightning struck him in 1942, when Roy was on a watchtower that didn't have a lightning rod. A bright flash of light and a powerful current discharge scarred the man, but didn't cause crucial damage to health. The next accident occurred in 1969, when lightning struck a tree near the road. The lightning passed through the tree to a car. Guess who was driving this vehicle? Roy lost control and almost drove off a cliff. Fortunately, he stayed alive again. Okay, the first time he was on the tower during a thunderstorm. The second time was on the road next to a tree, and as we know, lightning often strikes trees. This meant Roy was in a potential risk area every time. But the third time happened in his front yard. Lightning struck the transformer and caught his shoulder. The fourth time happened in 1972. Lightning struck Roy while he was working. From that moment on, the man began to suspect that this natural phenomenon was somehow attracted to his body. Maybe it was a curse, or maybe everything could be explained from a scientific point of view. A year later, lightning struck him for the fifth time. A thunderstorm started that day. Roy decided not to try his luck again and hid in his truck. And so, when the storm calmed down, Sullivan got out of the car and bam! Another lightning strike. There were 2 times left before the record. They occurred in 1976 and in 1977. Roy's bad luck spread to his wife. One day, lightning struck her too. It didn't hurt her, but scared a lot. So far, no one has broken Ray's record, but obviously people haven't tried to do that. Okay, lightning, fires, snowstorms, hurricanes, and earthquakes. But how about tsunamis? Unfortunately, this is one of the most terrible and devastating disasters on the planet. If you survived it, you're definitely lucky. Zarul Fuadi from Indonesia survived these devastating water disasters twice. The first occurred in Indonesia in 2004. And the second happened a few years later during an earthquake in Japan. During the second time, Zarul was in the building on the 3rd floor and felt a jolt. He was shocked and immediately remembered the tsunami he had experienced before. The tsunami hit the city, but our hero and his family survived. After this double trouble, he decided to move to his homeland, Indonesia. Despite the terrible events, Zarul looks at what happened calmly. Any catastrophe can happen to any person at any moment, but it doesn't mean you should live in fear forever. So, he focused on the bright side of life.
What if some of the brightest minds in Europe believed they had been chosen to receive messages from aliens? In the 1960s, a group of intellectuals in Spain was convinced that beings from the planet Oumuamua were reaching out to them, and the story only gets stranger from there. 1960s Spain was a breeding ground for what is known as the UFO fever, which had reached its peak in the United States during the 1950s with the Roswell incident. If you're not familiar with this famous case, we have a full video on our channel about it. The Spanish fever began with a UFO sighting, one that had been announced in advance, by letter. Yes, you heard that right. Days before the flying saucers appeared, Fernando Sesma, founder of the Society of Friends of the Space Visitors, received a series of strange typewritten letters. At first glance, they seemed ordinary, formal, precise, but as he read, he realized something astonishing. The letters claimed to come from extraterrestrial beings. Their authors introduced themselves as the Umates, inhabitants of a planet called Oumuamua, supposedly located in the Virgo constellation, 14 light-years away. They described their deep interest in studying humans, but assured they had no intention of interfering with Earth's development. Then came the most shocking revelation: a specific date, location, and time when they would make their presence known. It wasn't just a cryptic message, it was a prediction of an imminent UFO sighting. Sesma and his group of space enthusiasts held meetings in the basement of Café Lyon, a space frequently visited by intellectuals of the time. There, beneath a mural of a smiling whale, they discussed topics such as spiritualism, the occult, symbolism, and, of course, extraterrestrials. The messages Sesma received from the Oumites were shared at these gatherings. It was in one of these letters that announced their intention to make themselves visible. The Oumites flying saucers reportedly made 3 appearances. The first in 1950 near Digne, followed by sightings in Aluche in 1966 and San Jose de Valderas in 1967. The second sighting was witnessed by José Luis Jordan Peña, a researcher of parapsychology and ufology, as well as a journalist and contributor to paranormal magazines. Curiously, he was the one who claimed to have seen the flying saucer firsthand. Adding to the mystery, traces were allegedly found at the supposed landing site. A year later, the second sighting was documented in photographs taken by regular attendees of the Smiling Whale meetings. The images showed a spacecraft marked with the distinctive UMO symbol on its base, further fueling speculation. Beyond these sightings, the Oumites' letters stood out for their sophistication. Addressed to experts and academics, they explored complex topics such as philosophy, technology, and scientific advancements in physics, electronics, and computational theory. Over 200 of these documents, supposedly written by aliens, remain accessible on the website umociencias.org. Among the letters available online, some feature colorful illustrated explanations, while others provide detailed insights into UMO's customs and traditions. Some go even further, questioning Earth's global power structures, promoting peace, and offering recommendations on how to build a better world, according to their extraterrestrial perspective. The UMO phenomenon didn't stay confined to letters and sightings. It spread across multiple countries and languages, gaining unexpected traction in the media. The extensive coverage led to an unusual level of public acceptance, turning the UMO affair into a widespread fascination. Even politics capitalized on the UFO craze. In 1989, at the height of Cold War tensions, the Soviet Union was allegedly visited by an Oumite flying saucer in the city park of Voronezh. Several children claimed to have witnessed humanoid beings emerging from the craft, a story that quickly made headlines. Whether genuine or not, the incident conveniently aligned with a growing global obsession with extraterrestrial life. Its impact on politics, media, and intellectual circles was undeniable. But in 1993, the mastermind behind it all finally spoke. José Luis Jordan Peña publicly admitted that he had fabricated the entire story to bring complex debates to the scientific community. He also described it as a social experiment that had spiraled out of control, prompting him to put an end to it. You're probably wondering, what did he mean by spiraled out of control? Well, the UMO phenomenon was also exploited for sinister purposes by depraved cults, such as Edelweiss, a sect of fanatics who lured minors under the pretense of being extraterrestrial princes. This horrifying case was one of the main reasons Jordan Peña decided to reveal the truth about his writings. He admitted to using a voice distortion device to create a metallic resonance during phone calls and revealed that he wrote the letters on weekends, sending them from different locations during his travels. However, given the vast number of letters and their global reach, it's unlikely that he acted alone. Many of his explanations also remain frustratingly vague for Oumite believers, who refuse to accept that Jordan Peña was solely responsible for all UMO communications. Even today, messages from UMO continue to appear on X and other media. Was it all just a hoax that spiraled out of control, or is someone, human or otherwise, still keeping the myth alive?
Pluto used to be considered a major planet, but later was reclassified into something called a dwarf planet. Something too big to be an asteroid, but too small to be taken seriously. How rude. But recently, scientists began to discuss the mystery surrounding one of Pluto's moons. It turns out it might be even cooler than all of us. It might be a double planet system. Pluto is residing in the distant Kuiper Belt. It's a vast area in our solar system, like a big rocky suburb beyond the orbit of Neptune. It's filled with small icy objects, similar to Pluto, called Kuiper objects. They're leftovers from the early days of our solar system and give us clues about how it was formed. It's where many comets come from. You already know that it's small, but it's remarkable just how small it is. Pluto has a width of about 1,400 miles. It's about half the size of the United States and smaller than our moon. Pluto's atmosphere is very thin, and composed of nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide. Stinky. It's also very cold there, with average temperatures being around minus 390 degrees Fahrenheit. Its orbit around the Sun looks like an oval, and 1 year on Pluto takes around 250 Earth years. Pluto also shows a strange and unusual retrograde rotation because it's tilted on its axis, which means that it spins on its side. If you were standing on Pluto, you'd see a lot of high, icy mountains, valleys, plains, and craters. The Sun would be very dim and far away, and it would always look like twilight. It's a colorful planet, surprisingly. You would see a rainbow of pale blues, yellows, oranges, and deep reds. And the most adorable fact about Pluto is its famous heart, called Tombaugh Regio. Pluto was discovered super late in the 1930s, later than the rest of the planets. Initially, we thought that it's the 9th planet in our solar system. However, the more we explored the Kuiper Belt, the more we realized that it's full of these medium-sized objects. We found 4 more little planets just like Pluto: Eris, Ceres, Makemake, and Haumea. They all shared the same characteristics, and that's where we figured out that Pluto belongs to another family and created a category of dwarf planets. There are a couple of differences between these two categories. The first obvious difference is size and mass. Major planets are much bigger and more massive. They also have to be spherical, while dwarf planets might not be perfect spheres and might have weird shapes, like an egg-shaped Haumea, for example. And just like a regular planet, a dwarf planet orbits the Sun, but it doesn't have a clear orbit. Its orbit is full of debris and random objects. These are the only differences between the two. Well, as you can imagine, the reclassification sparked quite a controversy. People even made up a new term, Plutoed, which means downgraded. But although it might be sad that Pluto isn't a major planet anymore, we can look at it like a story about finding your true family. And finally, while standing on Pluto, you would see its 5 moons: Styx, Nix, Kerberos, Hydra, and the most mysterious one, Chiron, also pronounced Charon. So you can pronounce it however you like. I'm going to go with Charon. Now Charon is Pluto's largest moon. It was discovered in the 70s thanks to NASA's spacecraft called New Horizons. The spacecraft took a picture that revealed a moon with a strange and fascinating huge red-brown spot on its surface. It's a vast canyon dwarfing the Grand Canyon. It seems that both Pluto and its moon can boast interesting formations on their surface. The thing about Charon is that it's very big for a moon. It's about half the size of Pluto. This makes scientists wonder, could it be that Pluto is a double planet system? The center of mass, or barycenter, of Pluto and Charon lie outside of Pluto. Normally, with planets and their moons, the center of the planet itself should be the center of the mass, with the moon orbiting around it. But in the case of these two, it seems like they orbit each other. Binary objects are quite common in the universe. These cosmic pairs form just like our moon, from giant impact events. But double planets are exceedingly rare, and we haven't discovered any double dwarf planets yet. So, if it's true, then Charon is actually the 6th dwarf planet, and that would be our first binary dwarf planet system ever. There's also another candidate, the dwarf planet Eris and its moon Dysnomia. The solar system is full of mysterious and fascinating moons, so fascinating that some of them might not even have actual life on them. We've been talking about microscopic life in space for a while now. The debates about whether we found some organic fossils on Mars or not have been going on for decades. With the development of our technology, we're finally getting onto something. Meet Enceladus, who has stolen the spotlight since NASA's Cassini probe arrived there. Enceladus is covered in a sort of snowy blanket, which is why it's so unusually bright and has some snow-covered craters. It's small, only about 310 miles, and is mostly composed of simple rock and ice. But in 2004, we found plumes of water bursting out from this moon's south pole, which means that there's liquid water beneath this moon's icy surface. It's probably because of Saturn and its other larger moon, Dione. Their gravitational dance creates tidal forces that keeps Enceladus warm and lively. All this means that Enceladus is now a top candidate in the search for life within our solar system. Of course, life requires more than just water, and we won't find any animals there or anything like that. But we might find some microscopic organisms, and that's awesome too. In fact, Saturn is winning the lottery when it comes to life candidates. For example, scientists have a wild idea that Titan, another of its moons, might be home to extraterrestrial life as well. Titan is a frosty moon, chilling at about minus 290 degrees Fahrenheit. Surprisingly, it has some lakes on its surface. But don't imagine your typical water bodies. These lakes are believed to be filled not with water, but with liquid ethane or methane. Back in 2005, NASA discussed that there might be life munching on chemicals like acetylene or hydrogen in Titan's lakes. And then, in 2010, NASA investigated this moon some more. They found missing hydrogen and acetylene on Titan's surface, hinting at the possibility of something eating away at these substances. That's why some scientists dare to imagine methane-eating beings in Titan's freezing lakes. Moreover, they suggested that if these creatures exist, they probably have much larger cells than animals on Earth. What we could find there is something much bigger than a simple microbe, even something like a small animal. But Saturn isn't the only lucky one. Triton is Neptune's biggest moon. And you guessed it, it's another life candidate. It's an icy world with frozen nitrogen all over its surface and a crust made of water ice, again, super chilly. However, Triton is a hotspot for geologists because it's one of just 5 moons in our solar system that likes to show off with its active geysers. It's shooting nitrogen gas up into space. That would be a cool show, if we could see that. These geysers mean that Triton has some secret source of warmth, which means that, just like with Enceladus, there might be some liquid water underground on Triton. And if this cozy spot for life does exist, we might find some organics there. Unfortunately, sending a mission to explore these celestial bodies isn't easy. The only spacecraft we've sent so far was our Voyager 2 in 1989. We need more time, money, and technology to develop spacecrafts that would be able to travel far and investigate the area beyond Mars. And even if we do, it'll take decades for this spacecraft to reach these places. In any case, let's hope that during the 21st century, we'll finally be able to fully explore our solar system and all its mysteries.
Night enveloped the desert above Heraklion. A group of archaeologists moved through the labyrinth of sunken ruins, illuminating their path with powerful flashlights. Suddenly, one of the researchers, Dr. Martin Hale, stopped in front of a temple wall. He carefully brushed away a layer of sand and discovered a strange bas-relief. A woman holding a creature with an unusually elongated head and enormous eyes. "This can't just be a stylized depiction of an infant," whispered his colleague, Alice Carter. "The Paracas skulls in Peru have similar shapes. Could this be evidence of hybrids?" The question remained unanswered, but the mystery of Heraklion continued to intrigue scientists. Theories ranged from ancient cults to contacts with extraterrestrial civilizations. However, biologists established that elongated skulls could be the result of artificial cranial deformation, a practice common in ancient times. No DNA analysis has shown traces of non-human genetics. Meanwhile, in another part of the solar system, the Viking 1 probe transmitted an image to Earth of a rock formation on Mars resembling a human face. The photograph instantly became a sensation, fueling conspiracy theories. "It's just pareidolia," astronomers stated. "The human brain is wired to recognize familiar shapes in random forms." Decades later, when NASA sent more advanced spacecraft, images confirmed that the face on Mars was merely an ordinary hill, with shadows creating the illusion of facial features. However, proponents of the ancient Martian civilization theory insist that the truth is being concealed. No less mysterious are the artifacts of the Maya civilization. Their bas-reliefs depicting beings resembling astronauts, their complex astronomical calculations, and myths of gods descending from the heavens suggest possible contact with extraterrestrials. Some researchers associate Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god, with alien beings. However, historians remind us that such imagery appears in many cultures and may carry purely symbolic meaning. In Scotland, on Arthur's Seat Hill, children stumbled upon 17 miniature wooden coffins with tiny figurines inside. The origin of these remains unresolved. Were they ritual offerings, connected to the murderers Burke and Hare, who sold their victims' bodies for medical research, or simply children's toys mistakenly perceived as something mystical? Some theories suggest they could have been a form of symbolic burial for souls who never received a proper grave. Others believe they were connected to an ancient superstition meant to ward off evil spirits. Another hypothesis suggests they were linked to an old Scottish practice of making talismans for protection against supernatural forces. The Antikythera mechanism found off the coast of Greece is another ancient enigma. This intricate device, over 2,000 years old, turned out to be an astronomical calculator ahead of its time. Studies revealed that the mechanism was used to calculate planetary movements and eclipses, proving the advanced knowledge of ancient Greek science. Many researchers now believe that similar devices might have existed, but no other examples have been discovered. Recent images from the Perseverance rover uncovered mysterious square structures on Mars. Geologists attribute them to natural crystallization and erosion processes, but UFO enthusiasts are convinced they are ruins of ancient constructions. The formations bear a striking resemblance to rectangular patterns seen in some ancient Earth structures, further fueling debates about potential past life on the Red Planet. In Germany, during excavations near Marburg Castle, students discovered a pocket sundial. The miniature device, several centuries old, amazed researchers with its precision and craftsmanship. Who owned it? Was it part of monastic heritage, used for prayers on a strict schedule? Experts believe that such sundials were rare and expensive, likely belonging to high-ranking individuals or scholars deeply engaged in astronomy and mathematics. Yet one of the most intriguing discoveries remains the Sabu disk, a 5,000-year-old artifact from Egypt. Its purpose remains debated. Some believe it was a ritual object, while others think it had a technical function, possibly part of an ancient machine. Some engineers speculate that its shape suggests it could have been part of a primitive flywheel or a component of an unknown mechanism. Certain studies suggest it could have been related to liquid movement or even served as a part of a lost mechanical system. Despite extensive research, its true function remains an enigma, adding to the ongoing fascination with the technological capabilities of early civilizations. The world is full of mysteries. Every solved enigma raises new questions. Were these artifacts merely the result of human ingenuity, or evidence of contact with forces we have yet to understand? As new discoveries emerge, the past continues to challenge our understanding, reminding us that history holds secrets waiting to be uncovered.
It was the year 2015 when U.S. Navy pilots flying training missions off the East Coast saw something truly eerie. They spotted oval-shaped objects moving quickly over the water. They seemed to rotate as they flew. At first, the pilots thought it was just one object, but soon they realized there were many of them, moving in unusual ways. These objects didn't look like normal aircraft. They didn't have visible engines, didn't produce exhaust, and didn't just hover near the sea like helicopters would. Some of them appeared at altitudes of 30,000 feet and were moving faster than the speed of sound. The strangest and scariest thing? The pilots had been observing similar objects almost every day for months. Mind you, those weren't rookie pilots. One of them was an experienced pilot with 10 years in the Navy. He, along with his fellow pilots, knew what typical aircraft looked like and how to stay calm under pressure. It wasn't until 2019 that the public heard about those sightings. That's when the New York Times published an article revealing them. The article included video footage taken by the pilots' plane cameras, which was later confirmed by the U.S. Navy in April 2020. The Navy officially released the videos soon after. In recent years, sightings of UFOs, now called unexplained aerial phenomena, have been reported by other reliable sources as well. The US government has started to take these sightings seriously and has even brought in scientists to quietly investigate what might be behind them. So far, we still don't know exactly what the pilots and others have seen. But this growing scientific interest is pushing us closer to finding out more. While military pilots reporting UFOs might be a recent development, the public has been observing and reporting them for decades. In fact, the UFO craze in the US can be traced back to the summer of 1947. On June 14th of that year, a rancher discovered strange debris on his land near Roswell, New Mexico. At first, he thought it was from a kite. But even after looking through the bits of rubber, tinfoil, paper, and wood, he still couldn't make sense of it. The rancher then told the local sheriff about his find. And since his ranch was close to the Roswell Army airfield, the sheriff reported it to the military. Officers came to check it out, and couldn't identify the wreckage either. The next day, the Army issued a press release saying that they had recovered the remains of a flying saucer. The local newspaper even ran a headline, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell." But just a few days later, the Army changed its story, claiming the debris was from a weather balloon. By then, though, the excitement over UFOs had already sparked, and UFO fever spread across the nation. Now, UFOs are real, in the sense that people have indeed seen objects they can't identify in the sky. But when people ask, are UFOs real? They usually mean, are we being visited by aliens? And science doesn't have an answer to that yet. After the Roswell incident, UFO sightings became more frequent. People made wild claims, saying they'd met aliens or even been abducted. These stories were mysterious and captivating. No wonder they gained traction. The government didn't help much since it was keeping its own secrets. Eventually, they admitted to hiding something, but it wasn't little green men from other planets. In 1995, the Air Force released a report explaining that the debris found on Brazel's ranch wasn't from a weather balloon, but from Project Mogul, a secret Cold War program that used balloons to detect missile launches of certain countries. As for the alien bodies people claim to have seen, they were crash test dummies used in experiments with ejection seats. In 2021, the US government released a brief report on UAPs, aka unexplained aerial phenomena, stating that they have found no evidence of aliens. At the same time, they acknowledged that many UAP sightings had been recorded since 2004, and those remained unexplained. According to the report, those sightings did not necessarily point to alien spacecraft. Some could be birds, debris like party balloons, secret military projects, or even new technology from other countries. In May 2022, Congress held a public hearing on UFOs, and high-ranking military officials testified there. They revealed that since 2021, 400 unexplained sightings had been documented, but none suggested extraterrestrial life. At the same time, there's more and more evidence hinting that Earth may not be the only place with life in the universe. Earth itself is 4.5 billion years old, and life emerged here around 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. Life on Earth began fairly quickly, which means that the process of life forming wasn't overly difficult. And if life could begin easily on Earth, it's likely that it could also start on many other planets in the universe. The Milky Way galaxy alone contains 1 trillion planets, and there may be trillions more in the universe. Given these numbers, there is a lot of potential for life elsewhere. However, just because there's a possibility of life elsewhere doesn't necessarily mean that aliens have visited Earth. That's why SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence researchers, are focused on detecting signs of life elsewhere in the universe, not on studying UFOs. For a long time, most scientists dismissed the study of UFOs as pseudoscience. That's why many researchers interested in UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, stayed silent to avoid being seen as eccentric. But this has started to change. In June 2022, NASA created a team of scientific experts to search for the unknown in air and space. The researchers suggested using NASA's huge amount of space data to assist in the study of UAPs. The team also made it clear that studies of UAPs should focus on evidence and data, not speculation. Instead of simply collecting stories or relying on accidental sightings, the researchers used telescopes to capture footage of the sky. They gather this data and then analyze it with the help of artificial intelligence. They plan to add more observatories, and over 100 scientists are already involved. Astrobiologist Julia DeMarines suggests that some UAP sightings could be caused by unusual weather conditions. For instance, spacecraft launched near sunset can create strange effects. The gases expelled by spacecraft reflect only the light reaching the upper atmosphere at that time. And since the sunlight remains reflective for a long period, such sightings can seem unexplainable. UAPs might also be caused by light reflecting off communication satellites. But could UAPs really be alien spaceships? People often expect first contact with alien life to be dramatic, but the reality might be more subtle. Our first encounter with alien life may actually be discovering their technology. For example, we might find a piece of space debris that didn't originate on Earth, like spotting an empty plastic bag blowing through space. We'd know it didn't come from Earth, but we wouldn't know where it came from. Another possibility is that the aliens we might encounter may no longer exist. In 1961, astronomer Frank Drake developed the Drake equation, which estimates how many alien civilizations might be capable of sending signals. The equation considers factors like the rate at which stars form and the number of planets capable of supporting life in a Goldilocks zone, a habitable zone located at the right distance from a star for water to remain a liquid. However, one key factor in the equation is represented by L, which stands for the length of time technological civilizations produce detectable signs of their existence. Humanity has only been technologically advanced for a little over 100 years, in a universe that is nearly 14 billion years old. It means that the timing for civilizations to overlap might be rare. Many civilizations might have existed before us, and many may come after us, but the chance that we overlap with theirs is slim. Despite this, some scientists believe that it won't be long before we find definitive evidence of alien life.
Are we alone in the universe? It's a question we've all asked ourselves, perhaps on a quiet, starry night, while gazing at the constellations and feeling small in the vastness of the cosmos. But what if science could actually answer it? Astrophysicists have been pondering this for decades. Back in the 1960s, a groundbreaking formula was introduced to estimate the chances of intelligent life within our galaxy, the Milky Way. It's called the Drake equation, and it was the first logical attempt to tackle this profound mystery. But here's the exciting part. After decades without a formula surpassing Frank Drake's, scientists at Durham University in England have introduced a brand new model that could help us understand the odds of life existing across multiple universes. Intrigued? Let's dive in. Frank Drake, a radio astronomer and SETI pioneer, introduced his famous equation in 1961. He aimed to estimate the number of civilizations in the Milky Way capable of emitting detectable radio signals. But Drake knew that certain conditions would have to be met. After all, how could a microorganism on a distant planet send us signals without even possessing intelligence? The equation itself is straightforward. Drake considered variables like the number of stars formed annually, the planets orbiting them in the habitable zone, neither too cold nor too hot, the fraction of planets where life could thrive and evolve, and finally, the lifespan of such civilizations. With these factors, the equation intended to address one big question. How many civilizations in our galaxy could be broadcasting signals right now? Since its publication, the Drake equation has sparked endless debate among scientists about the values of its variables. Its simplicity makes it brilliant, but also a constant reminder of how much we still don't know. So what makes this 2024 model so revolutionary? The researchers factored in something the Drake equation didn't: the expansion of the universe and the role of dark energy. This mysterious force, which makes up 2/3 of the total matter in our universe, accelerates its expansion. But here's the catch. For life to form, ordinary matter must clump together to create stars and planets. These stars and planets must remain stable for billions of years to allow life to evolve. This new model calculates the likelihood of intelligent life forming not just in our universe but across hypothetical universes, a scenario known as the multiverse theory. This research doesn't estimate the quantity of intelligent life in our universe. Instead, it calculates the likelihood of an observer existing in a universe with specific characteristics. And here's where it gets interesting. The researchers found that a typical observer in another universe would likely experience more dark matter than we do. In other words, our universe is statistically unusual. They also discovered that a more efficient universe, one that could convert up to 27% of its ordinary matter into stars, might have better odds of forming life. By comparison, our universe only converts about 23%. More stars mean more chances for life to develop. So, while our universe isn't the best candidate for fostering life, we're proof that the improbable is possible. This branch of science, called computational cosmology, blends theory, physics, programming, and statistics to tackle one of the universe's greatest mysteries, the role of dark matter in shaping the universe. Dr. Daniele Sorini from Durham University explains that understanding the parameters governing our universe, such as dark matter density, could even help us understand why we exist. A profound thought, isn't it? And here's the kicker. While a universe with more dark matter might have more stars and better odds of forming life, our existence proves that life can thrive against the odds. So, as we gaze into the night sky and wonder who or what might be out there, one thing is clear. We're part of something extraordinary, even in a universe that's anything but ordinary. An air traffic controller registers a distress call from a commercial pilot. Another call and one more. All of the calls report the same, an unidentified flying object. These alleged sightings happened between Saturday, December the 7th, and Sunday. Pilots were claiming they had seen numerous mysterious flying objects and lights over Eugene, Oregon. After Live8c.net, which broadcasts air traffic control transmissions, published the audio recordings of the pilots' reports, this news went viral on social media platforms. The Federal Aviation Administration confirmed the sightings a few days later. They said that a pilot had reported observing unidentified lights while flying in Seattle Air Route Traffic Control Center airspace. But at the same time, the FAA didn't confirm the authenticity of the audio, making the rounds on social media. Now, if you listen to the audio attentively, you'll find out that some object was registered by air traffic control collision avoidance systems. You can also hear air traffic control informing the pilot that no military activity had been happening in the area. At 8:39 p.m. on Saturday, a United Airlines pilot said on the transmission that the lights appeared just straight west of Eugene. They saw 3 or 4 of them. What shocked the United Flight 1596 pilot the most was that the lights were all altitudes up and down, which was pretty crazy. The National UFO Reporting Center also got a report, this time from a different pilot. He overheard the chatter over air traffic control channels while landing the plane. That pilot confirmed the sightings reported over Eugene around 8:40 p.m. Soon after that, the pilot of a medical evacuation aircraft under tail number N661LF joined the conversation, announcing they had just seen another light. It zipped toward the plane and then dashed back out toward the ocean. According to the pilot's statement, the light was red and moving at an extreme speed. After receiving all these reports, air traffic control realized they needed to act fast, so they started instructing the pilots to do everything they could to avoid a collision. They cleared the planes to maneuver as necessary, left or right, to steer clear of the UFO out there. Fast forward to the following Friday, December 13th. Life Flight Network issued the following statement. On Saturday evening, December 7th, during a routine flight near Eugene, Oregon, one of our crews observed an unusual moving light in the sky. We can confirm that it was one of our pilots on the ATC recording that has been widely distributed over the last couple of days. While the nature of the light remains unidentified, at no time did it pose any safety risk to our aircraft or crew. Neither Life Flight Network nor our crew, though, are speculating about the origin or nature of the light, and our focus remains on the safe and efficient operation of our services. But the main question remains, were those bizarre moving lights alien spaceships? Well, the UFO Reporting Center doesn't support this idea. They claim that sightings like these are common, but they probably don't involve extraterrestrials visiting us. They might actually be SpaceX's Starlink satellite internet constellation. The thing is, at first, Starlink satellites move in a perfectly straight line, and most pilots know what such bright lights are and can identify them. But when the satellites get to their destination point where they're supposed to get into their final orbits, they begin moving around, doing maneuvers. That's when they can form weird formations. Often, those are shaped as triangles. Plus, these satellites can move back and forth and create patterns. Honestly, they can look pretty eerie, and tons of pilots don't know about that. So, when Starlink satellites rise high into the sky, loads of pilots report them as UFOs.
There is hardly any other place as mysterious as Area 51, a highly classified U.S. Air Force military facility in Nevada. For a long time, the U.S. government didn't even admit it existed. It was shrouded in secrecy, causing all kinds of wild rumors. It wasn't until 2013 that they finally acknowledged both the base and the name Area 51, all thanks to a Freedom of Information Act request, a way regular people or organizations can officially ask the government to share information about what they're up to. What happens there is still super secret. The public is kept out with warning signs, electronic surveillance, and armed guards. Flying over Area 51 is also off limits, but these days, you can now see it on satellite images. The base even has massive runways, some as long as 12,000 feet. Area 51 has become the center of countless conspiracy theories because of its secretive nature and its ties to classified military projects. According to some of the most popular theories, it's used for storage, examination, and reverse engineering of alien spacecraft and the study of extraterrestrial beings. Other theories claim that joint projects with aliens are conducted there. Some ideas involve experiments in weather control, time travel, and teleportation, as well as work on exotic propulsion systems. Many of these theories focus on supposed underground facilities at Groom Lake or nearby Papoose Lake, known as S4. Some of the wilder claims include a secret underground railroad and a hidden airstrip that disappears when water is sprayed on it. In the mid-1950s, when civilian aircraft flew at lower altitudes and military aircraft like the U-2 flew higher, UFO sightings increased. Pilots often reported seeing strange objects, especially during the early evening when the U-2's reflective wings appeared to glow in the setting sun. The Air Force's Project Blue Book investigated many of these sightings, and while they couldn't explain everything, they did eliminate UFO reports caused by high-altitude aircraft. Their wide, disc-shaped fuselage and extreme speeds of over 2,000 miles per hour made them look otherworldly when reflecting sunlight. The rumors surrounding Area 51 probably contributed to keeping the base's operations shrouded in secrecy. In 1989, Bob Lazar claimed to have worked at a secret facility within Area 51 known as Sector 4, located underground near Papoose Lake in Nevada. He said that he had been hired to study alien spacecraft that had been recovered from a crash. According to him, he worked on a UFO that was powered by a mysterious element not found on Earth. In addition to Lazar, there was an interview with a 71-year-old mechanical engineer who claimed to have worked at Area 51 during the 1950s. He described working on a flying disc simulator based on a crashed extraterrestrial craft. He claimed that the simulator was used to train military pilots to fly alien technology. The engineer also mentioned interacting with an alien being called J-Rod, a telepathic translator. These claims added to the growing belief that Area 51 was not only a military testing facility, but also involved in extraterrestrial research. In 2004, Dan Crane claimed that he had worked at Area 51 on a project involving the cloning of alien viruses. He also asserted that he worked alongside J-Rod during his time at the facility. However, his academic credentials are unclear, and he was allegedly working as a parole officer in Las Vegas while claiming to be earning a PhD. In 2019, a viral Facebook event called for people to storm the base to see the aliens. It was named Storm Area 51, They Can't Stop All of Us. They plan to rush the gates of Area 51 and force the government to reveal its secrets about extraterrestrials. The U.S. Air Force, however, strongly discouraged people from attempting to trespass, warning of legal consequences, and the storming of Area 51 never happened. Picture this. We finally make contact with aliens. Exciting, isn't it? But then comes the big question. How do you even start a conversation with beings who might be as different from us as apples are from algebra? Enter Olaf Witkowski with an idea that's, well, pretty out there. He thinks the best way to say hello to extraterrestrials is to threaten them. Here's his reasoning. No matter what kind of alien life form we're dealing with, whether those are slimy space blobs or super advanced warriors, there's one universal trait all life shares: the will to survive. It's the basic definition of life itself. His idea is to make them feel like their survival is under threat because, as he puts it, they'll understand that. Essentially, it's like tapping on a fish tank to see if the fish are awake, except these fish might be armed with laser beams. But hold on, this idea isn't about actually hurting anyone. Witkowski's whole point is that survival is a language that surpasses biology or culture. If aliens perceive us as a threat, it might actually open the door to showing them we're capable of cooperation too. Once we've got their attention, we might even find common ground in the basic instinct to stay alive. Sounds like nihilism to me. But before you start picturing Witkowski as some kind of evil sci-fi villain, let's clear that up. He's anything but. Think of him more like a philosopher meets scientist. Calm, introspective, and all about exploring ways to create understanding. He's traveled the world, mastered about a dozen languages, and dedicated his career to studying how AI systems cooperate. If anyone's got a shot at cracking the code of alien communication, it's this guy. Still, not everyone's convinced by his poke the aliens approach. For decades, scientists have been discussing the theory that math and physics could act as a universal language. The idea is that if we beam a signal containing something like prime numbers, the aliens would recognize it as intelligent. After all, a prime number is a prime number, whether you're in the Milky Way or Andromeda, right? Well, perhaps not. Carl Sagan, an American astronomer and planetary scientist, once tested this idea by handing a coded message to talented scientists at a party and asking them to decode it. Spoiler, they failed. And if humans can't crack a supposedly universal message, what makes us think aliens would? Then there's the old debate about whether we should even want to meet extraterrestrials in the first place. Many SETI aka Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence researchers are optimistic, arguing that any civilization advanced enough to travel between stars must also be peaceful. After all, they'd need to have avoided destroying themselves to reach that point. Plus, let's face it, Earth probably doesn't have anything they can't find somewhere else in the galaxy. Mining our planet for resources when there are countless uninhabited planets out there just seems like bad economics. But not everyone's so sure. Some argue that the galaxy might still be a survival of the fittest kind of place, where the most aggressive civilizations end up on top. Even if most aliens are peaceful, who's to say there aren't a few space pirates out there looking for trouble? On the other hand, what if aliens aren't here to conquer us, but to study us? Maybe their way of reaching out is by testing our survival instincts, kind of like saying, hey, let's see what you're made of. To them, it might not seem hostile at all, a version of a handshake, even if it feels like a punch to us. So what do we do if that day ever comes? There's no perfect answer. Some scientists will keep sending out math problems into space hoping for a friendly reply. Others might be more open to riskier strategies like survival-based mind games. Either way, first contact is bound to be a scenario unlike anything we've ever faced. And if you were in charge, would you try Witkowski's approach and poke the alien bear to start a conversation? Or would you play it safe and hope they send us a "we come in peace" message first? The United States Air Force came up with the term UFO, unidentified flying object, back in 1953, and over time, it's come to mean anything that might hint at aliens trying to contact us. There's an actual field called ufology, dedicated to studying these kinds of things. But there's an unexpected twist. The authorities don't really like the term UFO anymore. Instead, they've switched to calling them UAP, which stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. It sure sounds more professional, doesn't it? It also kind of distances the term from decades of wild alien theories tied to UFOs. Now, if you're into UFOs or UAPs, this is actually a pretty exciting time. Back in December 2020, when the government passed a huge spending bill, there was a little clause tucked in there about UFOs. Basically, it called for more transparency and pushed agencies to share what they know. And shockingly, the CIA has recently dumped all of its declassified UFO documents online. That's 2,780 pages of material now available to the public, and you can find it all on a site called the Black Vault. It's run by John Greenewald Jr., a guy who's basically dedicated his life to collecting and sharing UFO-related info. But of course, getting those documents wasn't easy. Greenewald had to file over 10,000 Freedom of Information Act requests to pry them out of the government's hands.
He says the whole process was like pulling teeth. And even now, the files aren't exactly user-friendly. They're in an outdated format, multi-page TIFF files, and the text scans are messy, making it hard to search through them. To help, Greenwald converted the whole collection into 713 PDFs. But even then, some of the documents were poorly photocopied, which made it tricky to dig into the details. Still, UFO fans have already uncovered some wild stuff. One document mentions a Bosnian fugitive claiming to have had contact with aliens. According to the document, at the time it was written, Radovan Karadzic remained alive, but the authorities didn't know where he was. The rumors of his near capture lacked evidence, and NATO countries blamed each other for failing to act. Critics saw the hunt for Karadzic as part of a political circus, with no real effort to bring him to justice. But the real question is whether they didn't want to, or just couldn't, because he wasn't on Earth anymore. Another document talks about mysterious explosions at midnight in a small Russian town. On the 12th of April, a powerful midnight explosion shook Sassovo, a small city in Russia's Ryazan region. The blast caused a lot of damage. It ripped off roofs, shattered windows, and rocked buildings like an earthquake. No one was seriously injured, but many people were shocked. Schools and kindergartens were closed, and buildings were temporarily patched with plastic sheeting. At the time when the document was written, the cause of the explosion was still a mystery. Theories ranged from buried World War II munitions, a falling air bomb, a meteorite, or a fiery UFO sighting reported by locals. Military experts suspected ammonium nitrate stored nearby, though this fertilizer had been safely used for years. A massive crater, 92 feet wide and 13 feet deep, was the only evidence of the disaster. One of the most intriguing finds is a 1970s document showing the Assistant Deputy Director for Science and Technology personally receiving some mysterious UFO-related info. But of course, like most government releases, a lot of the good stuff is blacked out. Greenwald still hopes and fights to get those redacted sections declassified. There must be something special about that information. As you see, digging into this data takes a lot of patience. You're basically wasting hours and hours of your life hoping to find something that stands out. But if you're still curious, check out the Black Vault. You might discover something mysterious and creepy in those thousands of pages. Let me tell you about one of the wildest UFO stories out there. The case of Antonio Villas Boas, a Brazilian farmer. He claimed he had been abducted by aliens in 1957. He was 23 at the time, working in the fields one night when he saw a strange red light in the sky. That light? According to him, it was an alien spaceship. He said the ship had landed and weird-looking 5-foot-tall aliens grabbed him, took him inside, and covered him in a bizarre, yucky gel. Then, things got even more alarming. Antonio claimed he had been taken to a room where extraterrestrials had taken samples of his blood, and then he had been left alone with a female alien. According to Antonio, she had white hair, red body hair, and cat-like blue eyes. Afterward, she pointed upward. The man thought that she meant she'd have their child in space. The aliens then gave Antonio a quick tour of their ship. But when he tried to take a souvenir, they stopped him. After about 4 hours or so, the man was released and could observe the spaceship fly away. Interestingly, Antonio stuck to his story throughout his whole life. Some people are sure that he made it all up, while others believe the encounter really did happen. One of the strangest things about this story is that right after the events, Boas started complaining of feeling weakness and nausea. He also suffered from headaches and lesions on the skin. Strangely, they appeared without any kind of bruising. After the farmer was examined, he found out that he had been exposed to a large dose of radiation from some unidentified source. His symptoms were those of mild radiation sickness. So whether you believe Antonio's story or not, it is still one of the most famous alien abduction cases out there. But how does science explain all these? Let's break down several explanations. Back in 1980, a researcher named Keith Basterfield suggested that some alien abduction cases might just be hallucinations. He and psychologist Dr. Robert Bartholomew even came up with the idea that people who reported abductions might be fantasy-prone. meaning they could have a hard time telling the difference between their imagination and reality. In 2011, scientists at the Phase Research Center took things a step further by using lucid dreaming to simulate alien encounters. They found that volunteers who were aware they were dreaming could actually create abduction-like experiences. In fact, 75% of the volunteers had dreams that felt just like encounters with aliens. Another explanation involves the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Many people, about 40%, experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lives. When this happens, they can have vivid dreams, and sometimes those dreams involve aliens. The combination of a super realistic dream and being unable to move can easily convince someone that they were abducted. Some experts think alien abductions might be linked to mental trauma. For example, D. Scott Rogo, editor of the magazine Fate, suggested that people who claim to have been abducted could be dealing with personal crises or recovering from past trauma. Such cases might also be false memories from hypnosis. Regressive hypnosis is a controversial technique used to uncover lost memories of alien abductions. While some believe it can help people recall genuine experiences, critics argue that it often leads to false memories. Hypnotists might accidentally suggest ideas during the session, leading people to believe something happened that never actually did. Studies have shown that around 50% of memories recovered through this method are likely made up. So, whether it's dreams, hallucinations, or false memories, there are plenty of theories explaining why some people genuinely believe they've been abducted by aliens. 70 years ago, physicist Enrico Fermi asked a question that has puzzled scientists ever since. If life is common in the universe, why haven't we seen any evidence of it? This question is often referred to as the Fermi paradox, and it has sparked tons of theories about why extraterrestrial intelligence might exist, yet remains undetected. From the idea that humanity might be alone in the universe, to the possibility that we're simply too early or too late to find any signs of alien life. A recent study gives us a new perspective on this mystery. It's led by Robin Hanson, the creator of the Great Filter Theory, and proposes a new model to predict when we might finally encounter alien civilizations. This model suggests that we may not meet other advanced civilizations for another 200 million to 2 billion years. Let's first define the models of alien civilizations proposed by the authors. Generally speaking, we can consider two types of civilizations: quiet and loud. Loud aliens quickly expand their sphere of influence and thus are very easy to detect. Quiet aliens are difficult to detect as they do not expand or change much before going extinct. We have little data on them. So let's take a closer look at the loud aliens. Since they should be easy to detect, we can fit theories about them into our data and say a lot about them. The authors presented a particularly simple model of loud aliens, the so-called grabby aliens. It is a model with only 3 free parameters. Let's discuss them. Once a civilization reaches a certain level of technological development, it begins to expand rapidly, altering the space it occupies and potentially preventing other civilizations from developing in that area. This expansion could take the form of large-scale colonization, the construction of massive structures, or the production of technosignatures, signals or artifacts that would be detectable from Earth. But such rapid growth requires an incredibly high level of technology. A complex history must be between the very origin of life and such a level of development. During this period of development, fatal events may occur, which a civilization either overcomes or not. For example, it's believed that life on Earth overcame a difficult step when it learned to consume oxygen. This idea is very similar to the idea of the Great Filter, according to which there is a barrier to development that makes detectable extraterrestrial life exceedingly rare. Such fatal events are called hard steps. And a number of these steps, Encrite, is the first parameter of the model. The second parameter is based on the timeline of significant events in the evolution of life on Earth. This is the probability of the origin of life. The universe is about 13.8 billion years old, and Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago. The earliest forms of life appeared between 4.2 and 3.8 billion years ago. but humanity has only existed for the last 200,000 years. And we've only had the technology to search for extraterrestrial life for about 70 years. So it's possible that advanced civilizations could take much longer to evolve, particularly on planets orbiting stars with much longer lifespans than our sun. When a civilization becomes loud, it begins to rapidly expand its domain. To do this, it uses interstellar flights. Such flights are carried out at some average speed, which limits the speed of expansion of such civilizations. So this expansion speed is the last free parameter. By studying the world around us, the history of our civilization, and the fact that we have not yet discovered any other civilization around us, scientists can obtain approximate values of the model parameters. This means they can predict the evolution of civilizations, as well as conduct stochastic simulations. And here are the amazing results they've obtained. Grabby civilizations might appear once per million galaxies before they start expanding, which means they're incredibly rare. Their rarity also means that they could be very difficult to detect. If a civilization is expanding rapidly, the light or signals they produce might not reach us until long after they've already begun their expansion. This could explain why we haven't detected any signs of advanced alien life so far. The study's most intriguing prediction is that humanity is likely to encounter the nearest loud civilization, one that is actively expanding and altering its environment within the next 200 million to 2 billion years. Until then, the chances of detecting alien technosignatures are slim. The researchers also suggest that there may be many quiet civilizations out there, those that haven't yet reached the level of technological development needed to expand and make themselves known. These quiet civilizations could be much closer than we think, possibly even within our own galaxy. But because they haven't yet begun their expansion, they're much harder to detect. The model implies that if we want to find evidence of extraterrestrial life, we may need to look for quieter, more subtle signs rather than expecting to see grand displays of alien technology. One of the biggest questions that has been torturing the minds of astronomers and common folks is, why haven't we found aliens yet? You'd think with a universe so big and filled with tons of stars and planets, we'd have already bumped into some extraterrestrial neighbors by now. This question was first asked by famous physicist Enrico Fermi during a lunch with his fellow scientists. They were chatting about UFO sightings and aliens, and suddenly Fermi asked, "Where is everyone?" It seemed like a casual comment, but it sparked a huge debate. If the universe is packed with stars, planets, and the possibility of alien life, how come we haven't seen any yet? This discussion gave birth to something we now call the Fermi paradox. It goes like this. Based on what we know, there should be advanced alien civilizations out there, perhaps even many of them. They'd likely have technology that could allow them to travel across space or at least send us signals to let us know they're there. But here's the kicker. Despite all of our technology and all the searching we've done, we haven't found a single shred of solid proof that these advanced civilizations do exist. So where are they? Over the years, a lot of theories trying to explain this paradox have seen the light of day. Let's talk about some of the most interesting ones. The rare Earth hypothesis claims that Earth might just be super rare, and planets like ours, with life, are incredibly uncommon. In this case, we could be the only planet in the Milky Way harboring life, or at least intelligent life. We might also be the first intelligent civilization in our galaxy to reach this level of development. In other words, we could be pioneers, however unbelievable it may sound. At the same time, it's not very scientific to rely on a rare chance. Some people think that maybe advanced civilizations were once here, but left the Milky Way. Perhaps they developed the technology of interstellar travel, enabling them to fly between galaxies. Or they could use other exotic ways, like wormholes, hypothetical structures connecting disparate points in space-time. Maybe they found more interesting and pleasant places to live far away from us. One sad possibility is that when a civilization becomes too advanced, it ends up destroying itself. Whether through war, environmental destruction, or something else, it could be that most civilizations don't last long enough to reach out to others. Now, imagine an advanced civilization being wiped out by a disease before they could even start exploring stars. In other words, it's possible that civilizations just don't survive long enough to meet others. Another hypothesis, not very flattering to us. What if these aliens are using technology that we just don't understand? Maybe they're communicating in ways we can't detect, like using signals beyond our current understanding of physics. Scientists are discussing such possibilities, but haven't found any yet. Aliens might also be intentionally avoiding us. They could be out there but staying silent, not so eager to reveal themselves until we're ready. Speaking of being ready, some people think that aliens could be waiting for us to reach a certain level of development before they make contact. Maybe they don't want to interfere with our growth until we're more advanced. Advanced civilizations could also go into virtual realities. And if they can live in digital worlds, they might stop caring about exploring the physical universe. Why bother? Another wild idea is that some civilizations might go into a type of hibernation, waiting for the universe to cool down, because it might be more energy efficient to do so. And last but not least, there's this creepy possibility that our entire universe is a computer simulation, and aliens are hidden from us on purpose. It's something like a video game that doesn't reveal all its secrets at once until you get to the next level. Now let's talk about the odds of life out there. We know that in just our galaxy, the Milky Way, there are probably around 20 billion planets that are roughly Earth-sized and located in the habitable zone, which means they're just the right distance from their stars to have liquid water. But how many of these planets actually have life? Could it be most of them, just a few, or almost none? And out of the planets that do have life, how many host intelligent beings with technology? In the 1960s, a scientist named Dr. Frank Drake tried to estimate the number of civilizations in our galaxy that could contact us. He came up with a famous equation, later called the Drake equation. It looks complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. It helps us calculate the number of intelligent civilizations based on things like how many stars are born each year, how many have planets, how many planets could support life, and how long a civilization might last. Here's what it looks like. Let's look into this equation in more detail. N is the number of intelligent civilizations that could contact us. R is the rate of star formation in our galaxy. FP is the fraction of stars with planets. NE is the average number of planets per star that could support life. FL is the fraction of those planets where life actually develops. Fi is the fraction where intelligent life arises. FC is the fraction of civilizations that can and want to communicate. L is how long these civilizations last before they disappear. The problem is, we don't know the exact values for most of these factors. So when we plug in numbers, which we know with large errors, we get answers with very large errors too. Depending on the values, the number of civilizations in our galaxy could be anywhere from almost 0 to tens of thousands. Right now, the best estimate we can come up with gives us a very small number, close to 0. In other words, even though our galaxy is huge, it's possible we're all alone here. Or nearly alone. One big reason we haven't met any aliens yet is that even if they do exist, we might not be able to visit them, at least not with our current technology. The speed of light is a hard limit in physics, meaning nothing can travel faster than it. This makes interstellar travel super slow. The situation could be better if there were exotic ways of travel, such as wormholes and warp drives. One day, they may turn out to be real, but so far, there is little hope for that. Even if we can't meet aliens face to face, there are still ways we might discover them. One of the biggest projects is called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. SETI scientists use huge telescopes to listen for radio signals from distant planets. If an alien civilization is sending out signals, we might be able to pick them up. And if we have a very powerful telescope, we might use it to take super detailed pictures of distant planets, maybe even Earth-like ones, hundreds of light years away. This could give us a whole new way to search for signs of alien life. In any case, even though we haven't found aliens yet, the search is far from over. Whether it's through new technology, better understanding of physics, or just listening to the stars, we might one day find that we're not alone in the universe. Until then, the question, where is everyone, keeps sparking curiosity. A shocking theory claims that mysterious comet Oumuamua might be a von Neumann probe, an alien spacecraft with broken engines tumbling through our solar system. It sounds extremely unsettling, but first things first, what is a von Neumann probe? Mathematician John von Neumann suggested the concept of self-replicating spacecraft that could in some ways mimic the features of living organisms or viruses. People started to refer to such hypothetical spacecraft as von Neumann probes. Von Neumann was sure that using self-replicating spacecraft would be the most effective way to perform large-scale mining operations, like mining asteroid belts or moons. The creators of such probes could take advantage of their exponential growth. Hypothetically, a self-replicating spaceship could be sent to a neighboring planetary system and look for raw materials there. Such materials could be extracted from moons, gas giant planets, asteroids, and the likes. Using these materials, the probe could make replicas of itself. The replicas could then be sent to other planetary systems, and the original probe could pursue its main purpose within its parent star system. This pattern sure does repeat the reproduction patterns of bacteria. That's why some experts think that von Neumann machines could be considered a form of life. There's also a theory that a self-replicating spacecraft could spread throughout a galaxy the size of the Milky Way in just 500,000 years, even if it used conventional theoretical methods of interstellar travel. In other words, it wouldn't even need to employ exotic faster-than-light propulsion. In 1981, mathematical physicist and cosmologist Frank Tipler argued that extraterrestrial intelligence couldn't exist because people had never observed von Neumann probes. Even if we take a moderate rate of replication, such probes should already be common throughout space. So, it's really weird that we haven't come across any of those yet. It might only mean that extraterrestrial intelligence doesn't exist. A response to Tipler's arguments came from astronomers Carl Sagan and William Neumann. They pointed out that Tipler might have underestimated the rate of replication, and von Neumann probes should have already started consuming most of the mass in our galaxy. Therefore, any intelligent race would avoid designing von Neumann probes in the first place, and try to destroy any probes as soon as they found them. Another objection to the prevalence of von Neumann probes is that civilizations that could potentially design such devices have an extremely high probability of self-destruction before producing such a machine. In any case, the assumed capacity of von Neumann probes is unlikely in reality. But then, how about Oumuamua? These days, scientists are using high-tech scanners to examine a huge, cigar-shaped comet, which might or might not be an alien probe. One idea is that it's an extraterrestrial civilization spacecraft, with broken engines wandering through our solar system. If that's the case, the object could easily be a von Neumann probe. Dr. Jason Wright from Penn State University thinks that a broken alien spaceship could move in exactly the same way as Oumuamua. Rather than moving through space like other space rocks, the 1,318-foot-long, 118-foot-wide space traveler is tumbling through the solar system. At the moment, it's traveling at a speed of around 200,000 miles per hour. In his blog, Dr. Wright says that if such derelict craft were not traveling fast enough to escape the galaxy, they could thermalize with the stars and end up drifting around like an interstellar asteroid or comet. They wouldn't have attitude control anymore and would eventually start tumbling. And it could distinguish them from regular interstellar asteroids. Plus, even though their propulsion was broken, their radio transmitters could work just fine. In any case, so far, it's just a theory, and further research is needed. What do you think? Is Oumuamua just a space rock or an alien space probe? In the middle of the previous century, flying saucers were constantly making headlines. America was going through a surge of reported UFO sightings. So, it shouldn't probably come as a surprise that the American authorities, namely the US Air Force, created a couple of short-lived programs. Those were Project Sign and Project Grudge,
and their main goal was to look into that phenomenon. These programs were followed by likely the most famous of them all, Project Blue Book. It was a large-scale government study that lasted from 1951 to 1969. The initiator of this program was Major General Charles P. Cabell. He was a former intelligence director of the Air Force. Project Blue Book scrupulously gathered over 12,600 reports about people seeing bizarre, unidentified objects in the sky. After thorough research, it was determined that most of those had natural, quite mundane explanations. As for the rest of the reports, the members of Project Blue Book simply didn't have enough data to evaluate them. That's why support for their efforts dwindled. Officially, Project Blue Book was closed in December 1969. But apparently, it didn't make American authorities lose interest in UFO sightings. Because in mid-December 2017, the world found out that they had secretly launched one more UFO research program in the late 2000s. Accordingly to certain documents, American authorities spent around $22 million over a 4-year span on a project called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, aka AATIP. This project was started in 2007, and its main goal was to study UFO phenomena. Most likely, all this activity was triggered by the 2004 Tic Tac incident. That's when a few U.S. Air Force pilots spotted unidentified flying objects off the coast of California. They captured them on video. None of the pilots could figure out what these objects were. They behaved in a weird way, as if our laws of physics didn't apply to them. They were reportedly flying extremely fast and rotating in unpredictable movements. It looks as if after that incident, American authorities decided to investigate whether those objects could be identified or not. And if not, they were eager to know where they had come from and if they had been a threat. When the New York Times story about the new project broke, officials announced that the study had been terminated in 2012. However, there were people who claimed that the program was still ongoing. One of those was a military intelligence official running the program until they quit in October 2016. In any case, let's have a closer look at this mysterious program. Indeed, the areas of research funded by the project resembled things you could find in Star Trek. For example, one grant was for the study of traversable wormholes, stargates, and negative energy. This study was conducted by Eric W. Davis of EarthTech International, Inc. Another grant sponsored the research of invisibility cloaking. One more area of study included warp drive, dark energy, and the manipulation of extra dimensions. This research was conducted by a theoretical physicist and director of the nonprofit Icarus Interstellar. As we've already mentioned, all these studies received at least $22 million of funding, but this sum could have been much bigger. No one has revealed why or how these studies were given such huge grants under the AATI program. The results of the study aren't known publicly either. The criteria for choosing these fields of research could be that warp drives and stargates might be useful for extraterrestrial civilizations traveling interstellar distances to visit our planet. Still, some people are not amused that such questionable fields of study were receiving substantial government funding. One of the best and most convincing pieces of evidence that extraterrestrial civilizations have visited Earth could be the epic Nuremberg space battle of April the 4th, 1561. It was recorded either in 1561 or 1566. Different sources provide different information. All the retellings of this story focus on the woodcut picture and a vague summary of events that occurred that day. The emphasis is always on crashed spaceships and space battles. Almost everywhere you read or hear the story, it goes like this. The inhabitants of the city woke up early on an April morning and saw a staggering celestial show that looked like a real space battle. This story sounds even more convincing when you find out that some objects allegedly fought for quite a while. And some even crashed. You can see them in the lower right corner. Look at the picture once again. Orbs and crosses fighting, a giant arrow, and bizarre tubes crashing ships. Wow, that had to be a spectacular cosmic battle. To make it all more plausible, Hans Glaser, the artist behind the woodcut, was a very real person. He really did woodcuts, and this one is indeed from the time and place that it says it is, meaning it's not fake, and it does depict a real event that had its own witnesses. For all intents and purposes, it looks like very convincing proof of aliens visiting us, but don't get your hopes up. A superficial perusal of facts seems to confirm an extraterrestrial presence on our planet. But the most likely explanation is much more mundane. The Nuremberg 1561 UFO battle is just an atmospheric phenomenon called a sundog, or parhelion. A sundog is a concentrated spot of sunlight that can sometimes be seen to the right or to the left of the sun, or even on its both sides simultaneously. Sundogs often appear as a pair of patches of light with subtle colors at the same altitude over the horizon as the sun. They can have a variety of forms, from colorful spots to patches of light so intense and bright, it looks like there are 2 additional suns in the sky. Sundogs are weird looking enough to make it seem that something scary and otherworldly is going on in the sky. At the same time, it's just our planet's atmosphere or ice in the upper parts of the sky acting as a prism or reflective device. This prism makes the light from the sun or moon do weird things. This image can help you visualize the phenomenon. Apparently, Nuremberg had the perfect conditions for this phenomenon to occur. If you examine the depiction of this event and compare it with modern pictures and videos, you'll soon realize that a sundog is indeed a more likely explanation than the galactic empire paying us a visit. Let's find the proof of this statement in the translated description of these events and in the woodcut picture itself. First, the sun showed and was seen with 2 blood-colored half-round strokes, like the diminishing moon right through the sun, and in the sun, above, under, and on both sides, stood blood-colored and partly bluish, or iron-colored, also black-colored round orbs. Now here's the photo of a sundog. It has a halo surrounding it, and a red orb. And if we have at least 1 red orb, there could be others showing up during other events. Plus, keep in mind that sundogs are like prisms. So, depending on how light is reflected, there could be multiple colors present during such a phenomenon. Now, referring to circled plates mentioned in the description, those could be halos. For example, this sun halo looks vaguely plate-like, and it seems to be linked to other sun halos. And indeed, people have seen halos with multiple orbs. Some of the orbs could have taken a cross-like shape. If we watch some modern videos of sundogs, we might notice that the orbs on film are sun-colored. But since the Nuremberg event happened between 4 and 5 a.m., the clouds and the sun could have had reddish and orange hues. As for the fighting, it could be as simple as one shape moving a bit and changing shape along with the movements of the sun. It could have looked as if it was pushing the other shapes out of the way. Do you agree with the scientific explanation? Or do you prefer to think that Earth was visited by guests from a galaxy far, far away? Write your opinion in the comments. Imagine you could travel through the universe by hitching a ride on space dust, meteoroids, comets, or even rogue planets. Wouldn't it be incredibly cool? This idea is known as panspermia. It has captivated minds for centuries, but despite its appeal, it hasn't gained much popularity among mainstream scientists. Mainly, it could be because it doesn't explain how life originated and isn't easily testable. At the same time, certain events have reignited interest in the theory, even among skeptics. And one of such events was the appearance of the mysterious Oumuamua in our solar system in 2017. Oumuamua was a mysterious object that zipped through the solar system at an astounding speed. It was the first interstellar object spotted passing through our star system and the first detected hyperbolic asteroid, an object with an orbit not bound to the sun. Observations indicated that Oumuamua was likely to be a highly elongated cigar-like object. Overall, it was a very unusual object. Scientists couldn't quite pin down what it was. Some of them suggested it was a comet, others bet it was an asteroid, and there were those who thought it might be a chunk of frozen hydrogen. In April 2020,
astronomers presented a new possible scenario for the object's origin. According to one hypothesis, Oumuamua could be a fragment from a tidally disrupted planet. If true, this would make Oumuamua a rare object of a type much less abundant than most extrasolar dusty snowball comets or asteroids. What made Oumuamua especially interesting to those who support the panspermia theory is that it was a visitor from another star system, so it was possible that it could have carried life across the galaxy. The idea of panspermia advances 3 stages: escape from a planet, transit through interplanetary space, and landing on another planet. Therefore, the Oumuamua hints that panspermia is possible. Recently, a new study titled The Implications of Oumuamua on Panspermia has seen the light of day. It was led by David Tsao from Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, an intern at Johns Hopkins University. The study explored how many objects like Oumuamua might exist and what characteristics they would need to transport life safely across the cosmos. The researchers considered different types of space debris, such as asteroids and comets, and estimated their potential to shield life from harmful radiation, particularly gamma rays from supernovae. If these objects weren't large enough, the intense radiation would sterilize any microorganisms hitching a ride. According to their findings, space debris made of materials like nickel or silicate could provide sufficient protection. But for a passenger to survive, they would need to have a minimum size of about 21 feet. The study also tried to estimate how likely it was that extremophiles organisms that can survive in extreme environments could have been delivered to Earth in this way. They calculated that roughly 40,000 objects of at least 33 feet in diameter could have impacted Earth during its first 800 million years. While this number might sound like a lot, the chances that Earth itself was seeded by panspermia are extremely low, less than 0.001%, according to the study. Interestingly, the researchers didn't just consider Earth as a recipient of panspermia, but also as a potential source. If Earth or another habitable planet ejected life-bearing material into space, that material could in theory seed other planets across the galaxy. The study suggests that under optimistic conditions, up to 100,000 Earth-like planets in the Milky Way could host life as a result of panspermia. However, many factors remain uncertain. For instance, the number of rogue or free-floating planets in the galaxy could significantly affect the panspermia hypothesis. Hopefully, when we discover more about these planets and the overall density of interstellar material, we will understand more about panspermia. The scientists have also underlined that the conditions in the galaxy were different in the past. For example, during an event known as the Late Heavy Bombardment, the rate of impacts on Earth and other bodies in the solar system was 100 to 500 times higher than it is today. If similar events occurred in other star systems, the potential for panspermia would be much greater. Despite its allure, the panspermia theory remains a fringe idea in scientific circles, all because of the many unknowns and its speculative nature. But as we gather more data from projects like the upcoming Rubin Observatory's Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, which is expected to detect many more interstellar objects and rogue planets, astronomers will likely revisit and reassess this idea.
In 2017, a strange object was spotted in our solar system. It had the shape of a long tube, similar to a pancake. No known asteroid or comet we've seen looks like that. Its exterior was also peculiar. It was at least 10 times more reflective than the average stuff that flies through space, with some saying it had a surface similar to polished metal. When it went past the sun and left our reach, it accelerated faster than what our gravity could account for. At first glance, it was like this thing had a rocket strapped to its back. This unusual visitor even got a special name, Oumuamua. It comes from Hawaiian and translates to scout or visitor from a faraway land. And because of its characteristics, scientists soon began to wonder if this was at last a visit from otherworldly creatures. Before they went full-on with the science fiction suppositions, astronomers gathered the information they were sure about, starting with the fact that Oumuamua must have come from another solar system. There must have been some unfortunate event in its home system that led to its ejection. What they didn't know was that this was a comet or asteroid. They're both celestial objects orbiting a sun, but they have distinct compositions and behaviors. Comets are composed primarily of ice, dust, and rocky material, often referred to as dirty snowballs. When a comet approaches the sun, the heat causes the ice to vaporize, releasing gas and dust particles into space. This creates a bright glowing tail that can extend for millions of miles. Comets generally have elliptical orbits, often taking them from the distant reaches of our solar system closer to the sun. Asteroids, however, are mostly made of rock and metal. In our neighborhood, they are remnants of the early formation of the solar system and are typically found in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Unlike comets, asteroids do not develop tails when they approach the sun, as they have no ice. Their orbits generally follow more circular paths compared to comets. By all accounts, Oumuamua should be a comet, because it seems to come from a different location in the universe. Yet, it doesn't exhibit the typical signs of cometary activity. Oumuamua lacks a tail and does not spew out gas as it passes by, not like me. Even though it behaves like a comet, it looks more like an asteroid. Now, another big question is how scientists even managed to spot Oumuamua in the first place. Considering the vastness of space and time in the galaxy, it's remarkable. Stars have lifetimes spanning millions or billions of years, and the formation of a solar system takes hundreds of millions of years. Even the fastest objects take tens of thousands of years to travel from one star to another. In contrast, humans have only been observing the skies with telescopes for around 400 years, a tiny fraction of cosmic time. And it's only in recent decades, even years, that we've had the technology to detect and track fast-moving, dim objects. Either rocks like these are abundant, or we've been incredibly lucky with our detections, or it's simply wanted to be seen. Now, another question that was asked was where such objects could come from. It's highly unlikely that Oumuamua came from a mature, stable solar system. That's because such systems don't eject enough material to fill up the galaxy. Occasionally, a random rock might get flung out, but it can rarely travel so far. Young systems, however, act differently. In these chaotic environments, collisions, mergers, and migrations are happening everywhere. Plenty of tiny rocks roam around, perfect candidates for ejection. The solar system that kicked Oumuamua out must have had a planet similar to Jupiter. Its massive size and gravity could influence other objects in the system, causing potential ejections. But not all solar systems develop Jupiter-sized planets. Often massive planets end up close to their stars, becoming hotter versions of Jupiter. These planets, snugly orbiting a sun, are less likely to eject debris. Now, Neptune-like planets may play a role too. While not as massive as Jupiter, they tend to call the outer regions of solar systems their home. Our solar system has the Kuiper Belt, a reservoir of comets in its outer reaches. During a solar system's early stages, interactions between Neptune-like planets and debris are common. Finding Neptune-like planets in other systems has been challenging, though. Our methods for detecting exoplanets work better for massive objects close to their stars, making it difficult to spot Neptune counterparts farther out. Oumuamua was also linked to a peculiar theory about how life came to be in the universe – panspermia. Now that's a hypothesis that suggests that life exists throughout the universe and can be distributed between planets by various means, such as asteroids, comets, or even spacecraft. It says that life must have originated in one location in the universe and then spread to other celestial bodies. Fans of the panspermia theory have suggested that such interstellar objects could potentially carry tiny microbes, those building blocks of life between star systems. If such objects were to impact a planet or a moon, they could transfer these materials and seed the celestial body with life. For now, there is no evidence to support the theory, that this comet in particular has transported life between star systems. After years of research, the overall consensus became that Oumuamua was indeed a comet. The reason why it moves so strangely is because it might have frozen hydrogen on its surface that reacts when touched by sunlight. The closer it got to our Sun, the faster it became, releasing that hydrogen and also changing its path through our solar system. Its color also supports this theory. It's red, which might mean it's been hit by cosmic rays for a long time. The longer it was touched by those rays, the more hydrogen it gathered in the process. But since they can't be completely sure, astronomers have a plan to follow this visitor. One idea is to send a mission to check it out. It's already far away from us, but it may not be too late just yet. We may be able to send a probe fast enough to catch up with the comet. The plan was named Project Lyra and aims to use the Earth's orbit and that of Jupiter to bounce out a probe far enough to reach Oumuamua. If it works, it will be the fastest space device we've sent out in the universe. One potential trajectory of the space probe involves the gravitational pull of our planet and that of Jupiter as a lasso effect, but not Ted Lasso. The probe will leave our planet and re-enter Earth's orbit before sending it to meet with Jupiter's pull. It will be sent back near our planet a second time, where it will be ejected with enough force to reach the comet. Project Lyra also aims to follow a second faraway visitor named Borisov. This one was discovered by an amateur astronomer and now bears his name. What's interesting about it is that it's, well, spotless. Similar to our experience with Oumuamua, we haven't seen anything like Borisov before either. Studies of the light coming from its cloud of dust and gas show it's very clean compared to other space objects. After it was first noticed in August 2019, astronomers studied its path through our solar system and concluded it came from another star too. But Borisov gave us more time to study it because we spotted it earlier in its journey through our neighborhood. Researchers used advanced telescopes to look at the dust coming off Borisov. They found it's throwing off over 400 pounds of dust every second. They also found Borisov has more carbon monoxide than comets from our solar system usually do. But the amount isn't the same everywhere on the comet. This tells us the space object probably started forming near its home star before moving away, maybe because of larger planets in its system. The light from Borisov is way more polarized than light from other comets we've seen, and its cloud is super smooth. This tells us Borisov has never interacted with another star.
A shocking theory claims that mysterious comet Oumuamua might be a von Neumann probe, an alien spacecraft with broken engines tumbling through our solar system. It sounds extremely unsettling, but first things first, what is a von Neumann probe? Mathematician John von Neumann suggested the concept of self-replicating spacecraft that could in some ways mimic the features of living organisms or viruses. People started to refer to such hypothetical spacecraft as von Neumann probes. Von Neumann was sure that using self-replicating spacecraft would be the most effective way to perform large-scale mining operations, like mining asteroid belts or moons. The creators of such probes could take advantage of their exponential growth. Hypothetically, a self-replicating spaceship could be sent to a neighboring planetary system and look for raw materials there. Such materials could be extracted from moons, gas giant planets, asteroids, and the likes. Using these materials, the probe could make replicas of itself. The replicas could then be sent to other planetary systems, and the original probe could pursue its main purpose within its parent star system. This pattern sure does repeat the reproduction patterns of bacteria. That's why some experts think that von Neumann machines could be considered a form of life. There's also a theory that a self-replicating spacecraft could spread throughout a galaxy the size of the Milky Way in just 500,000 years, even if it used conventional theoretical methods of interstellar travel. In other words, it wouldn't even need to employ exotic faster-than-light propulsion. In 1981, mathematical physicist and cosmologist Frank Tipler argued that extraterrestrial intelligence couldn't exist because people had never observed von Neumann probes. Even if we take a moderate rate of replication, such probes should already be common throughout space. So, it's really weird that we haven't come across any of those yet. It might only mean that extraterrestrial intelligence doesn't exist. A response to Tipler's arguments came from astronomers Carl Sagan and William Neumann. They pointed out that Tipler might have underestimated the rate of replication, and von Neumann probes should have already started consuming most of the mass in our galaxy. Therefore, any intelligent race would avoid designing von Neumann probes in the first place, and try to destroy any probes as soon as they found them. Another objection to the prevalence of von Neumann probes is that civilizations that could potentially design such devices have an extremely high probability of self-destruction before producing such a machine. In any case, the assumed capacity of von Neumann probes is unlikely in reality. But then, how about Oumuamua? These days, scientists are using high-tech scanners to examine a huge, cigar-shaped comet, which might or might not be an alien probe. One idea is that it's an extraterrestrial civilization spacecraft, with broken engines wandering through our solar system. If that's the case, the object could easily be a von Neumann probe. Dr. Jason Wright from Penn State University thinks that a broken alien spaceship could move in exactly the same way as Oumuamua. Rather than moving through space like other space rocks, the 1,318-foot-long, 118-foot-wide space traveler is tumbling through the solar system. At the moment, it's traveling at a speed of around 200,000 miles per hour. In his blog, Dr. Wright says that if such derelict craft were not traveling fast enough to escape the galaxy, they could thermalize with the stars and end up drifting around like an interstellar asteroid or comet. They wouldn't have attitude control anymore and would eventually start tumbling. And it could distinguish them from regular interstellar asteroids. Plus, even though their propulsion was broken, their radio transmitters could work just fine. In any case, so far, it's just a theory, and further research is needed. What do you think? Is Oumuamua just a space rock or an alien space probe? It was a warm morning in Siberia, June 30th, 1908. Suddenly, a bright flash illuminated the sky. It was an event no one could explain for decades. The Tunguska explosion, one of the most mysterious disasters to have ever occurred on Earth. It could have been an asteroid crash, like the one that destroyed dinosaurs millions of years ago. But for one creepy fact, there was no impact crater. The event itself happened in the vast forests of northern Siberia, over the Podkamennaya Tunguska River. The blast was so insanely powerful that it leveled about 80 million trees across a massive area of 830 square miles. What phenomenon could have had such an immense force? No one could understand it. Thousands of animals lost their lives and the ground lay scorched. Witnesses saw glowing skies and something they described as a fireball, a bluish light brighter than the sun that had streaked across the sky. Seconds later, there was a flash and a sound like artillery fire. The shockwave shattered windows hundreds of miles away. People felt the blast's force, getting knocked off their feet from afar. For years, scientists puzzled over what exactly had happened. As I've already mentioned, weirdly, the area had no impact crater. But the damage and eyewitness reports left no doubt that something immense and horrifying had occurred. This bizarre lack of evidence resulted in wild theories. Some people suggested it was an alien spacecraft that had crashed in the region. Others speculated it might have been a mini black hole or antimatter particle. There was also an idea that about 10 million tons of natural gas had leaked from deep in Earth's crust. This gas rose into the atmosphere and drifted along like a giant invisible wick. Eventually, there was a spark, maybe lightning, which set it on fire. The flames traveled down the wick of gas back to its source on the ground, causing a huge explosion. But this idea didn't get very popular. Which theory was true? Scientists couldn't agree on one and were in doubt. To add to the mystery, the impact area was incredibly difficult to reach. It took almost 2 decades before scientists could investigate that remote site. In 1927, scientist Leonid Kulik brought an expedition there. They did their best to investigate the region and find the long-awaited answers. But they found nothing. No meteorite fragments, no crater, just millions of fallen trees and slowly disappearing signs of total devastation.
the mystery began to clear when a similar event occurred over a century later. On February 15, 2013, the Chelyabinsk meteor exploded in an airburst over Chelyabinsk, around 1,500 miles west of Tunguska. This time, many people witnessed and recorded the event on video, which gave scientists vital clues. New computer models helped scientists reconstruct the size, speed, and impact of the Chelyabinsk meteor. It was likely a large asteroid about the size of a 5-story building, exploding around 15 miles above ground. The blast shattered 1 million windows and hurt over 1,000 people. Fortunately, it wasn't powerful enough to cause damage on the same scale as Tunguska. Now imagine a meteoroid racing into Earth's atmosphere, transforming into a blazing meteor. It's traveling so fast that the air in front of it compresses and heats up, setting it on fire. But it's so large that it doesn't just burn up. All of a sudden, it explodes. When that happens, the blast releases so much energy that a powerful shockwave spreads out. Since this explosion happens in the air, it leaves no impact crater. Back in the early 1900s, with limited technology and the remote location, scientists were left with a puzzle. Only much later did they eventually conclude it had been an airburst, where an object explodes high in the atmosphere, never striking the ground but releasing enough energy to devastate the area. Most likely, it was a giant asteroid about the size of a 25-story building. It could have been moving at around 33,500 miles per hour and exploding about 3 to 6 miles above Earth's surface with enormous, incomparable force. Let me tell you about one of the wildest UFO stories out there. The case of Antonio Villas-Boas, a Brazilian farmer. He claimed he had been abducted by aliens in 1957. He was 23 at the time, working in the fields one night when he saw a strange red light in the sky. That light? According to him, it was an alien spaceship. He said the ship had landed and weird-looking 5-foot-tall aliens grabbed him, took him inside, and covered him in a bizarre, yucky gel. Then, things got even more alarming. Antonio claimed he had been taken to a room where extraterrestrials had taken samples of his blood, and then he had been left alone with a female alien. According to Antonio, she had white hair, red body hair, and cat-like blue eyes. Afterward, she pointed upward. The man thought that she meant she'd have their child in space. The aliens then gave Antonio a quick tour of their ship. But when he tried to take a souvenir, they stopped him. After about 4 hours or so, the man was released and could observe the spaceship fly away. Interestingly, Antonio stuck to his story throughout his whole life. Some people are sure that he made it all up, while others believe the encounter really did happen. One of the strangest things about this story is that right after the events, Boas started complaining of feeling weakness and nausea. He also suffered from headaches and lesions on the skin. Strangely, they appeared without any kind of bruising. After the farmer was examined, he found out that he had been exposed to a large dose of radiation from some unidentified source. His symptoms were those of mild radiation sickness. So whether you believe Antonio's story or not, it is still one of the most famous alien abduction cases out there. But how does science explain all these? Let's break down several explanations. Back in 1980, a researcher named Keith Basterfield suggested that some alien abduction cases might just be hallucinations. He and psychologist Dr. Robert Bartholomew even came up with the idea that people who reported abductions might be fantasy-prone, meaning they could have a hard time telling the difference between their imagination and reality. In 2011, scientists at the Phase Research Center took things a step further by using lucid dreaming to simulate alien encounters. They found that volunteers who were aware they were dreaming could actually create abduction-like experiences. In fact, 75% of the volunteers had dreams that felt just like encounters with aliens. Another explanation involves the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Many people, about 40%, experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lives. When this happens, they can have vivid dreams, and sometimes those dreams involve aliens. The combination of a super realistic dream and being unable to move can easily convince someone that they were abducted. Some experts think alien abductions might be linked to mental trauma. For example, D. Scott Rogo, editor of the magazine Fate, suggested that people who claim to have been abducted could be dealing with personal crises or recovering from past trauma. Such cases might also be false memories from hypnosis. Regressive hypnosis is a controversial technique used to uncover lost memories of alien abductions. While some believe it can help people recall genuine experiences, critics argue that it often leads to false memories. Hypnotists might accidentally suggest ideas during the session, leading people to believe something happened that never actually did. Studies have shown that around 50% of memories recovered through this method are likely made up. So, whether it's dreams, hallucinations, or false memories, there are plenty of theories explaining why some people genuinely believe they've been abducted by aliens.
Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Modern humans, we've only been around for about 300,000 years. So what was happening on our planet before we showed up? Was it just empty? Or could there have been other advanced civilizations that came before us? Civilizations so ancient that all traces of them have been wiped away. This is the heart of the Silurian hypothesis, a fascinating scientific thought experiment proposed in 2018 by astrophysicist Adam Frank and climate scientist Gavin Schmidt. They asked a simple but mind-blowing question. If an industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years ago, would we even be able to tell? The hypothesis is named after the Silurian period, a time over 400 million years ago when life was thriving in Earth's oceans. But the name is also a nod to Doctor Who, where the Silurians are an ancient reptilian species. It's a clever way to frame the idea, but the science behind it is serious. So, if there were advanced civilizations before us, where are all the ruins, the tools, the skyscrapers? Well, that's the thing. Earth is a master at recycling itself. Our planet is constantly changing. Mountains rise and fall, oceans become deserts, and entire continents shift over millions of years. Processes like plate tectonics, erosion, and volcanic activity are like nature's cleanup crew. Think about it. If humanity disappeared today, how long would it take for all traces of our civilization to vanish? Scientists estimate that within a few million years, even our toughest structures, like skyscrapers and nuclear waste sites, would be ground into dust and scattered across the planet. So, if our civilization can disappear so completely, what chance do we have of finding evidence of one that existed hundreds of millions of years ago? This is where Frank and Schmidt's idea gets really interesting. Instead of looking for physical evidence, they proposed searching for chemical fingerprints in Earth's geological record. For example, carbon isotopes. Burning fossil fuels changes the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13. If an ancient civilization used industrial processes, we might find these anomalies in ancient rock layers. Nitrogen levels. Synthetic fertilizers could leave behind unusual amounts of nitrogen-15. Radioactive isotopes. If they used nuclear technology, we might find traces of plutonium-24 or iodine-129. Elements that don't occur naturally in large amounts. But here's the catch. Natural processes can also produce similar chemical signatures. For example, massive volcanic eruptions can release huge amounts of carbon dioxide, altering isotope ratios. So, how do we tell the difference? One of the key pieces of evidence Frank and Schmidt looked at was the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, PETM, a period about 56 million years ago when Earth's temperature spiked by 5 to 8 degrees. This event released a massive amount of carbon into the atmosphere, similar to what humans are doing today. Could this have been caused by an ancient industrial civilization? It's a fascinating idea, but most scientists aren't convinced. The PETM was likely caused by natural processes, like volcanic activity or the release of methane from ocean floors. Plus, the rate of carbon release during the PETM was much slower than what we see today. So, if the PETM wasn't caused by ancient factories, what other clues could point to a lost civilization? Some researchers have suggested that dinosaurs might have been more advanced than we think. Take the Troodon, for example. This small bird-like dinosaur had a large brain relative to its body size, binocular vision, and grasping hands, traits that suggest it could have been capable of complex behavior. Paleontologist Dale Russell even speculated that if dinosaurs hadn't gone extinct, trudons might have evolved into intelligent, human-like creatures he called dinosauroids. But let's be real, even the smartest dinosaurs were probably nowhere near building cities or launching rockets. So what about something even stranger, like a civilization based on fungi? In 2000, a Japanese biologist named Toshituki Nakagaki conducted an experiment that blew everyone's minds. He placed a slime mold in a maze with a sugar cube at the end. Within hours, the mold figured out the shortest path to the sugar without a brain. This raises a wild question. Could fungi or other simple organisms have formed some kind of ancient intelligent network? If so, their civilization would leave behind no physical traces, just subtle chemical clues. Of course, not everyone is on board with the Silurian hypothesis. Critics point out that there's no direct evidence, no tools, no buildings, no artifacts. All the proposed chemical traces could be explained by natural processes. Evolution makes it unlikely that any species before humans could have developed advanced technology. So, was there an ancient civilization before us? The answer is, we don't know. But the Silurian hypothesis isn't really about proving the existence of lizard people or dinosaur engineers. It's about challenging our assumptions and asking, what don't we know about Earth's history? And who knows, maybe one day we'll discover a clue that changes everything.
And we have liftoff of Mars Global Surveyor as America begins its journey back to the Red Planet.
There's a weird structure on Mars, a square, a near-perfect square standing alone in the endless red desert. And it looks too perfect, too precise to be anything but artificial. Nature's chaotic, and it rarely makes things look so deliberate. So the internet took one look at it and lost its mind, as the internet tends to do. The image spread like a virus on social media, igniting every conspiracy theory you can think of. Some were convinced it was proof that intelligent life had once tread upon the Martian sands. Well, let's dive in and sort it out. The image is real, and it's really old. The thing, not the picture. NASA's Mars Orbiter camera snapped it in 2001, capturing a tiny slice of Martian terrain, and there sat the square. Now, is that evidence for intelligent life? Well, Mars is an empty world now, a rust-colored desert. But once, long ago, it may have been something else entirely. A planet filled with roaring rivers, vast oceans, and thick clouds rolling across the sky. Now, in a world like that, life, if it ever had a chance, could have taken root. And there's a possibility it did. Scientists think that life could have existed on Mars in a short period from around 4.1 to 3 billion years ago. It could have started during the early era of Martian history, called the Noachian period, and lasted all the way to the late Hesperian period. Meanwhile, here on Earth, the first oceans were just forming. Life on our planet was just beginning, in the form of tiny bacteria in deep-sea hydrothermal vents. While Mars was already fully wet, on Earth, there were no plants or animals, just microscopic life trying to survive. So, Mars took the lead in the life game. It had a much thicker atmosphere, which could have trapped enough heat to keep water liquid. Valley networks, huge traces across the red landscape, show us the incredible story of rainfall, rivers, and lakes. Huge asteroids were still hitting Mars at the time, and they could have brought organic molecules with them. But if that's true, what happened, and where did life go? A recent NASA study suggests that the answer is more complicated than we thought. Astronomers believe that something drastic happened to Mars, like boom, and its cozy climate was gone, its atmosphere thinned. Without a strong magnetic field like Earth's to protect it, solar radiation stripped away the air, leaving Mars cold and dry. The ocean simply evaporated. Some of the water escaped into space while the rest froze underground or became locked in polar ice caps. Today, all that remains is a ghostly memory, dry channels and salty mineral deposits. But it looks like the transition wasn't sudden at all. It was slow and gradual. The planet was changing from wet and warm to cold and dry over millions of years. In fact, Mars kept its ocean even after the temperatures dropped to freezing. Some parts of Mars, especially the northern lowlands, might have remained wet for many, many centuries. Shouldn't the water freeze when it gets below 32 degrees Fahrenheit? Well, yeah. But there are many reasons why this miracle happened, like Mars's thick atmosphere and warm water traveling through currents. And during that time we mentioned before, from Noachian to the late Hesperian, life could have found a way. Microbes on Earth thrive in some of the harshest places, beneath Antarctic ice, in deep sea vents, in toxic volcanic lakes. Hey, life doesn't care. So these times in Martian history would be amazing for it. But don't be mistaken, Mars was never a paradise. Even during its cozy times, it wasn't as lush and green as we might imagine. In its early days, Mars was something more extreme, something closer to the young Earth. During the Noachian period, it was warm yet wet. Then, the climate shifted into the Hesperian period. Oceans were stretching across the northern lowlands. Temperatures dropped, and snow piled high, forming massive glaciers in the south, transforming the planet into an icy world. Finding microscopic life at that time is possible, but an intelligent civilization? That's less likely. The square that went viral isn't evidence for intelligent life yet, and here's why. First things first, people freak out because nature doesn't make straight lines. But that's not really true. Actually, nature does it all the time. For example, here on Earth, we have the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, a beautiful field of hexagonal basalt columns. These are completely natural. They're formed by volcanic activity. There's also the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. Hey, remember it from the Close Encounters movie in the 80s? That's a symmetrical rock formation, and it was created by erosion. However, if we looked at these things from space, they'd look artificial. So, what is the square? How about a fracture pattern in the rock or some terrain that's broken apart along straight lines due to stress? This happens on Earth all the time when rock expands and contracts over time. And on Mars, the surface is just constantly battered by meteors, winds, and extreme temperature shifts. No wonder rock would get stressed. What happens here is another case of pareidolia. It's our brain's favorite thing, to spot patterns in something random. Hey, we evolved like this. So sometimes we might look at natural objects and see insane stuff. Faces on trees, animals in clouds, shapes, and so on. Besides, NASA has been photographing Mars for decades. We have high-resolution images of craters, mountains, valleys, riverbeds, hey, everything. Wouldn't an ancient civilization leave us, well, something better than some square-like rock? Even though things erode over time, we'd find more signs, roads, foundations, artifacts, ruins, or at least something. Though, to be fair, we do see something. The square wouldn't be the first time Mars has played tricks on us. Over the years, we've spotted everything, from tunnels to carved faces, even Bigfoot. Or this doorway, for example, a perfectly cut rectangular opening. That's what people saw when NASA's Curiosity rover sent back an image of the East Cliffs on Mount Sharp. It's almost like an ancient passage leading deep into the surface. You just need to go in and find some fantastic underground base. Well, NASA decided to take a closer look at it. It turns out it's just 12 inches tall and 16 inches wide, the size of a dog door. That's because what we're looking at isn't a doorway, but an open fracture, a break in the rock that happens naturally over time. These kinds of cracks are extremely common, both on Earth and on Mars. They form when bedrock is stressed, expands, contracts, or gets eroded by wind and time. If you walk through a desert here on Earth, you'd see plenty of similar shapes. Canyons, cliffs, and even boulders have fractures that, from the right angle, might look like doorways. They're just not getting photographed by NASA. Also, the straightness of lines turns out to be just a trick of perspective. If you zoom out, you'll see that it's just one small break in a much bigger rock formation. Or the infamous Cydonia face. The photo was taken back in 1976 by NASA's Viking 1 orbiter when it was scanning Mars. In the region known as Cydonia, it captured what looked like a massive humanoid face, a rocky formation about 1.2 miles long. And this one face inspired books, documentaries, movies, and podcasts. But when NASA's Viking orbiters first took pictures of Cydonia, the cameras weren't super advanced. The image of the face had a low resolution and made the details fuzzy. NASA's later missions had far better cameras, and when Mars Global Surveyor revisited Cydonia in 2001, the truth was undeniable. The face was just a hill, a lumpy rock formation with ridges and depressions carved by wind and erosion. And in 2006, during another mission, a colored image with insanely high detail was made. No traces of face left there whatsoever. That's another pareidolia trick for you. Now, Mars has plenty of secrets left to uncover, but they will be related to its fascinating history, not some secret ancient civilization. The conclusion is, don't trust everything you see online. Sometimes